When Adrian Voss walked into his penthouse office that Tuesday morning, he expected the usual reports, surveillance updates, confirmation that his empire ran exactly as he commanded. What he didn't expect was his wife standing by the window in a cream silk blouse, sunlight cutting through her dark hair, holding a manila envelope that would shatter 3 years of careful control. Elena didn't tremble. She didn't plead. She simply placed divorce papers on his mahogany desk and met his eyes with a calm that terrified him more than any rival ever had. For the first time in his calculated life, Adrian Voss had no strategy for what came next. If you're drawn to stories where power meets vulnerability, where silence hides devastating secrets, and where love demands more courage than empire building ever could, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels. Oh, the Manhattan skyline glittered through floor-to-ceiling windows, 43 stories of steel and glass separating Adrian Voss from the ordinary world below. His office occupied the entire top floor of the Voss Tower, a monument to legitimate business ventures that concealed the intricate web of power he'd woven through the city's underbelly. Everything here spoke of control. The minimalist furniture chosen for intimidation rather than comfort, the surveillance feeds hidden behind abstract art, the encrypted phone that never stopped buzzing with reports from lieutenants scattered across 3 boroughs. Adrian stood at those windows now, hands in the pockets of his tailored charcoal suit, watching the Tuesday morning traffic crawl through intersections 43 floors below. At 38, he'd built an empire that made politicians nervous and rival syndicates cautious. He'd survived assassination attempts, federal investigations, and the constant pressure of maintaining an iron grip on territory that stretched from the waterfront to Wall Street's shadowy corners. But he hadn't survived his marriage. The sound of his office door opening didn't make him turn. Only 3 people had the access code: his head of security, his attorney, and Elena. The footsteps were too light for Marcus, too confident for Patterson. "You're early," Adrian said, still facing the window. "I thought you were meeting your sister for lunch." "I canceled." Elena's voice carried that particular calm that had always unsettled him, the kind that came from someone who'd made a difficult decision and found peace in it. He turned slowly, taking in the sight of his wife standing just inside the doorway. She wore a cream silk blouse tucked into high-waisted navy trousers, her dark hair pulled back in a way that revealed the elegant line of her neck. 3 years of marriage, and she still took his breath away. The sharp intelligence in her brown eyes, the quiet strength in the way she held herself, the subtle defiance in choosing to stand rather than sit. But something was different today. There was a distance in her gaze that hadn't been there before, a finality in the way she clutched the manila envelope against her chest. "What is it?" Adrian asked, though part of him already knew, that calculating part of his mind that read threats in body language and detected vulnerability in the smallest hesitations. Elena walked forward, her heels clicking against the Italian marble floor with measured precision. She didn't speak until she reached his desk, until she placed the envelope down with a soft sound that seemed to echo in the vast office. "Divorce papers," she said simply. "I need you to sign them." The words hit him like a physical blow, though his expression barely changed. Years of controlling his reactions in rooms full of dangerous men had taught him to never show weakness. But this wasn't a negotiation with rivals. This was Elena, and she was leaving. "No," Adrian said, the word coming out harder than he intended. "It's not a request." Elena's voice remained steady, her hands folded in front of her now that they were no longer holding the envelope. "I've already consulted with an attorney. Everything's divided fairly. The prenup makes it straightforward." "When did you move out?" The question came from that same calculating place, the part of him that needed to understand the timeline, the strategy behind her moves. 3 days ago. 3 days. She'd been planning this for how long? Weeks? Months? How had he missed it? "Where?" Adrian asked. "That's not your concern anymore." Elena met his eyes without flinching. "I'm not asking for anything beyond what the prenup specifies. I just need your signature." Adrian moved around the desk, closing the distance between them. Elena didn't step back, though he saw her shoulders tense slightly. Even now, after 3 years of keeping her at arm's length, his proximity affected her. That had to mean something. "Talk to me," he said, his voice dropping to that low register he used when he actually wanted someone to listen rather than obey. Whatever's wrong, we can fix it. No. The word was soft but absolute. We can't. Elena, do you know when I realized this marriage was over? She interrupted him, and there was no anger in her voice, just a terrible weariness. It was 6 months ago. We were at the mayor's charity gala. You spent the entire evening 3 steps away from me, close enough that everyone knew I was your wife, but far enough that no one could mistake us for a couple in love. Adrian remembered that night. He'd positioned himself strategically, keeping Elena visible but not vulnerable, showing the city's power players that he had a wife, but making sure they understood she wasn't a weakness they could exploit. I was protecting you, he said. No. Elena shook her head slowly. You were protecting yourself. From feeling anything. From letting anyone see that you might actually care about something other than control. That's not true, isn't it? She tilted her head, studying him with that sharp intelligence that had first attracted him to her. When was the last time you asked me about my day? When was the last time we had a conversation that wasn't about schedules or appearances or what event we needed to attend next? Adrian's jaw tightened. This life requires sacrifices. You knew that when you married me. I knew I was marrying a complicated man, Elena said. I didn't know I was marrying a ghost who happened to share my last name. The words struck deeper than she probably intended. Adrian had spent 3 years keeping Elena at a distance, convinced it was the only way to keep her safe in a world where weakness meant death and love was the ultimate vulnerability. He'd watched rivals lose everything because they cared too much, saw men make fatal mistakes because they prioritized heart over strategy. So he'd chosen coldness, chosen distance, chosen to love her silently rather than risk showing the world what she meant to him. And now she was leaving. I won't sign, Adrian said flatly. Elena's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Disappointment, maybe, or the last remnant of hope dying. You don't have a choice. New York is a no-fault state. I can file unilaterally. Then why come here? Why ask? Because despite everything, I thought you deserved to know. Elena picked up her purse from where she'd set it on the chair. I thought maybe you'd surprise me, show some emotion, ask me to stay because you actually want me, not because you're afraid of losing control over another aspect of your empire. This isn't about control. Everything with you is about control. She moved toward the door, and Adrian felt panic rise in his chest, an unfamiliar sensation that made his pulse quicken. Goodbye, Adrian. Wait. The word came out rougher than he intended. Elena paused, her hand on the door handle, but she didn't turn around. There's something off about this. What are you talking about? Adrian's mind was racing now, processing information the way he did when a deal smelled wrong or a situation felt staged. How did you get past security? I'm your wife. They know me. Marcus screens everyone who comes up here, even you. Adrian pulled out his phone, scrolling through the security logs. He should have called me when you entered the building. Maybe he forgot. Marcus doesn't forget. Adrian's eyes narrowed as he studied the logs. Elena had entered this building at 9:47 a.m. Marcus had logged it, but there was no call record, no notification. Did he say anything to you when you came through security? Elena turned slightly, confusion crossing her features. He asked if I was here to surprise you. I said yes, and he smiled. It was strange, actually. He seemed pleased. Something cold settled in Adrian's stomach. Marcus Vale had been his right hand for 5 years, the one person he trusted to handle security, to know everything about his schedule, his business, his vulnerabilities. Marcus knew every detail of Adrian's life, including the one thing Adrian had worked hardest to protect, his marriage. How long have you been planning this? Adrian asked, setting his phone down. A few months. Did you tell anyone? Elena hesitated. My sister, and my attorney, obviously. No one else? No. Why? Adrian moved to his computer, pulling up security footage from the past 3 months. Did anyone contact you? Encourage you to leave? Suggest that I was... He paused, choosing his words carefully. Unfaithful or dishonest? No. But Elena's voice had lost some of its certainty. Adrian, what's going on? I don't know yet. He scrolled through footage, looking for patterns, anomalies, anything that might explain the unease crawling up his spine. But something feels wrong. But this is classic you, Elena said, and the weariness was back in her voice. You can't just accept that I want to leave. There has to be some conspiracy, some external threat. It can't possibly be that your own actions drove me away. I'm not saying that's not true. Adrian looked up from the screen, meeting her eyes. I know I failed you. I know I chose distance over connection, strategy over vulnerability. But I need you to trust me on this. Something isn't right. Trust you? Elena's laugh was bitter. That's rich, coming from a man who's kept me at arm's length for 3 years. I kept you at arm's length to keep you alive. The words came out harsher than he intended, filling the space between them with a truth he'd never spoken aloud. Elena stared at him, and for the first time since she'd walked into his office, her composure cracked. What does that mean? She asked quietly. Adrian closed his eyes briefly, warring with himself. Telling her the truth meant admitting vulnerability, acknowledging that she mattered enough to be a target. But maybe that ship had already sailed. Maybe keeping her in the dark had done more damage than any truth could. 3 months after we married, he began slowly, I received a message. No signature, no way to trace it. Just a single photograph of you leaving your yoga studio and a note that said, beautiful wife, fragile thing. Elena's face went pale. You never told me. I handled it. Increased security, had Marcus run down every possible lead. We never found who sent it, but the message was clear. You were visible, and visibility meant vulnerability. Adrian moved closer to her, watching her process this information. Every public appearance after that, every event where we were photographed together, I made sure to position you as my wife in name only. Respected, but distant. A trophy, not a treasure. So people wouldn't know you cared, Elena said, understanding dawning in her eyes. So they wouldn't know where to strike. You should have told me. Her voice shook slightly. You should have let me make that choice. You're right. Adrian's admission surprised even himself. I took your agency away because I thought I was protecting you, but all I did was make you feel alone. Elena wrapped her arms around herself, a gesture of self-comfort that made Adrian's chest ache. I still can't do this. Even knowing that, I can't stay in a marriage where I feel invisible. I'm not asking you to stay, Adrian said, though the words cost him. Not yet. I'm asking you to wait, just a few days. Let me figure out what's happening. Nothing's happening. I'm leaving because I'm unhappy. Then why did Marcus smile when you told him you were here to surprise me? Adrian pressed. Why did he look pleased? In 5 years, I've never seen that man show emotion about anything. Elena's expression shifted, uncertainty flickering across her face. Maybe he thought we were reconciling. Marcus has never cared about my personal life. His only concern is security and operations. Adrian pulled up footage from this morning, watching Marcus's face as Elena entered the building. There, that subtle smile, the way his eyes tracked her movement toward the elevator. He's watching you like you're a chess piece moving exactly where he wants. You're being paranoid. Maybe. Adrian zoomed in on Marcus's expression. Or maybe I'm finally seeing something I should have noticed months ago. Elena stepped closer to the screen, studying the footage. What are you suggesting? I don't know yet. Adrian pulled up more footage, this time from 3 months ago, the period when Elena said she'd started planning to leave. But I want to check something. You said you've been planning this for months. Did anything specific happen that made you decide? Elena was quiet for a moment, thinking back. I tried to talk to you about us, about how distant we'd become. Do you remember? When? October 15th. You'd just gotten home from a business trip. I waited up for you, tried to have a conversation about our marriage. Her voice grew softer, more vulnerable. You barely looked at me, said you were tired and went to your office. Adrian pulled up that date, scrolling through his calendar. October 15th, he'd been in Boston, meeting with suppliers. He'd gotten home around midnight, exhausted from negotiations that had dragged on for hours. But according to his calendar, his flight had been delayed. He hadn't gotten home until 2 a.m. What time did I get home? He asked carefully. Around 11:30. I remember because I'd been watching the clock. Elena. Adrian turned the screen toward her, showing her the flight records. My plane was delayed. I didn't get home until after 2 in the morning. I went straight to bed because I assumed you were already asleep. Elena stared at the screen, confusion clouding her features. That's not... I remember talking to you. You were wearing your gray suit. You said you were tired. I never saw you that night. Adrian's mind was racing now, pieces clicking together in a pattern he didn't like. Did we talk face to face, or did you call into my office? Elena pressed her fingers to her temples. I called. The door was closed, and you said to come in, but I just spoke through it. You sounded irritated, so I didn't push. What exactly did I say? You said, "Not now, Elena. I'm exhausted. We'll talk later." She looked up at him, and fear was starting to creep into her eyes. But that wasn't you. I was in the air when that conversation happened. Adrian pulled up building security footage from that night, scanning through until he found it. 11:47 p.m., Elena standing outside his office door, talking to someone inside. The angle didn't show who was in the office, but it wasn't Adrian. He'd been somewhere over Connecticut. Who was in your office? Elena whispered. The only other person with access to this floor. Adrian's voice had gone cold, that deadly calm that came over him when he identified a threat. Marcus. Elena stepped back from the screen, her hand going to her throat. He was pretending to be you? Voice modification isn't difficult, and he knew my schedule, knew I'd be late, knew you'd be waiting up. Adrian was scrolling through more footage now, looking for other anomalies. What else happened? What other conversations did we have through closed doors? Several. Over the past few months. Elena's voice was shaking now. Whenever I tried to talk to you about us, you were always too busy, too tired, too distant, but I never saw your face during those conversations. Because it wasn't me. Adrian found another instance. November 3rd, Elena standing outside his office again. December 7th, January 10th. Each time, Elena speaking to someone she thought was her husband, receiving cold dismissals that drove her further away. He's been sabotaging us, making you think I didn't care, making you feel isolated. But why? Elena wrapped her arms around herself again, and Adrian saw her trembling. What does he gain from destroying our marriage? I don't know yet. Adrian pulled out his phone, but before he could dial, it buzzed with an incoming call. Marcus. He's calling me. Don't answer it, Elena said quickly. Adrian looked at her, saw the fear in her eyes, and felt rage building in his chest. Not the hot, impulsive kind, but the cold, calculated fury that made him dangerous. Go into the conference room, lock the door. Don't come out until I tell you to. What are you going to do? Find out what's really going on. He waited until Elena disappeared into the conference room before answering the call. Yeah. Boss, we need to talk. Marcus's voice sounded tense. It's about your wife. What about her? She's planning to leave you. I just saw her entering the building with what looked like legal documents. Adrian's grip tightened on the phone. Marcus knew Elena had already been here, had already delivered the divorce papers. This call was theater, a performance designed to make Adrian think Marcus was on his side. How do you know? Adrian kept his voice neutral. I have my sources, people loyal to you who keep an eye on potential problems. Marcus paused. I know you care about her. Even if you don't show it, I thought you should be prepared. Prepared for what? For the possibility that she's been compromised. Marcus's voice dropped lower. Boss, I hate to say this, but I've been tracking some concerning activity. Elena's been meeting with someone, private meetings, encrypted communications. I think she might be working with your enemies. The accusation hung in the air between them, and Adrian felt a cold clarity settle over him. This was the endgame. Marcus wasn't just trying to destroy the marriage, he was trying to turn Adrian against Elena completely, to make him believe she was a traitor. Who's she meeting with? Adrian asked. I'm still tracking that down, but I have proof. Marcus sounded almost eager now. Bank records showing payments to an offshore account. Phone records with a burner number that traces back to the Castellano family. The Castellanos, Adrian's biggest rivals, the one organization that had been trying to move into his territory for the past 2 years. If Elena was working with them, she'd have access to information that could destroy everything he'd built. But she wasn't. Adrian knew that with absolute certainty now. Send me everything, Adrian said. I want to see all of it. Of course, I'll bring it up in an hour. And boss? Marcus's voice turned sympathetic. I know this is hard, but you need to protect yourself, even from her. Adrian ended the call without responding, his mind racing through possibilities. Marcus had fabricated evidence. That took time, planning, resources. This wasn't a recent decision. This had been in motion for months, maybe longer. The question was why. He pulled up Marcus's personnel file, something he should have examined more closely years ago. Marcus Vale, former military intelligence, recruited 5 years ago after a dishonorable discharge that Adrian had overlooked because the man's skills were exactly what the organization needed. But what if the discharge hadn't been a liability? What if it had been a cover? Adrian dug deeper, using access codes most people didn't know he had, pulling up sealed military records that required 3 different types of encryption to access. It took him 15 minutes to break through the layers, and what he found made his blood run cold. Marcus Vale had been discharged from military intelligence after an investigation into unauthorized surveillance operations. He'd been running his own network, collecting information on superior officers, building leverage for reasons the investigators never fully understood, because he'd been pulled out before the investigation concluded. Someone with significant power had made it all go away, had Marcus discharged quietly rather than court-martialed, and that someone had been connected to the Castellano family. Son of a bitch, Adrian muttered, pulling up more records. Marcus had been a plant from the beginning. 5 years of building trust, gathering information, positioning himself as indispensable, all while reporting back to the very people trying to take Adrian down. But why target Elena? Why spend months manipulating the marriage instead of just feeding information to the Castellanos? Adrian's phone buzzed with an email from Marcus, the evidence he'd promised. Adrian opened it, scanning through fabricated bank records and doctored photographs showing Elena meeting with men Adrian recognized as Castellano associates. It was good work, convincing enough that if Adrian hadn't already suspected Marcus, he might have believed it. And that's when Adrian understood. This wasn't about intelligence gathering. This was personal. Marcus wanted Adrian isolated, vulnerable, emotionally destroyed. He wanted Adrian to push Elena away completely, to believe she'd betrayed him, to make decisions from a place of hurt and rage rather than strategy. Because an isolated Adrian was a weak Adrian, and a weak Adrian could be taken down. Clever, Adrian said quietly, almost admiring the strategy despite his fury. Marcus had identified Adrian's greatest vulnerability, his fear of caring too much, and weaponized it, had turned Adrian's protective instincts against him, made him destroy his own marriage in the name of safety. The conference room door opened and Elena stepped out. I heard you on the phone. What did he say? That you're working for the Castellanos. Adrian showed her the email. That you've been betraying me for months. Elena's face went white as she scrolled through the fabricated evidence. This is insane. I've never met any of these people. These photos are fake. I know. Adrian took his phone back. The question is, what do we do about it? We go to the police? And tell them what? That my head of security has been impersonating me through doors and fabricating evidence? Adrian shook his head. We need proof. Real proof. And we need to understand the full scope of what he's done. Elena wrapped her arms around herself again, and Adrian recognized it now for what it was. A protective gesture she'd developed over 3 years of feeling unsafe in her own marriage. Because of him, because of his choices. I'm sorry, he said quietly. Elena looked up at him, surprise flickering across her face. For what? For all of it. For keeping you at a distance. For thinking strategy was more important than trust. For not talking to you about the threats instead of just handling them. Adrian moved closer to her, close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her brown eyes. You were right. Everything you said about me choosing control over connection, it's all true. I don't understand what's happening, Elena said, and her voice was small in a way that made Adrian's chest ache. Why would Marcus do this? What does he want? To break me. Adrian's voice was flat, certain, and he almost succeeded. Elena was quiet for a moment, processing. Then she looked up at him with those sharp, intelligent eyes that had first made him fall for her. So what's our next move? Our. The word sent something warm through Adrian's chest. Partnership instead of isolation. Collaboration instead of protection through distance. We give him what he wants, Adrian said. We make him believe his plan worked. How? You leave. Make it public, make it messy. Let him think I'm devastated and isolated. Adrian pulled out his phone, already formulating the strategy. Meanwhile, we work together to figure out his endgame and gather real evidence. You want me to actually leave? Elena's voice carried a note of hurt. Only visibly. Behind the scenes, we stay in contact. We work together. Adrian met her eyes. But Elena, this is dangerous. If Marcus suspects we're onto him, if he realizes you're helping me, then he'll come after me. Elena finished the sentence, and there was steel in her voice now. Let him try. Adrian felt something shift in his chest. Pride mixed with fear, admiration mixed with terror. This was the woman he'd married, the one he'd hidden away thinking he was protecting her. But Elena had never needed protecting. She'd needed partnership. There's something else, Adrian said. You mentioned you tried to leave before. What did you mean? Elena's expression shifted, old fear flickering across her features. About 6 months ago, I'd packed a bag. I was going to stay with my sister just to get some space and think. But I got a phone call. From who? Unknown number. A man's voice. Elena's hands were trembling slightly. He said, Mrs. Voss, I wouldn't recommend leaving tonight. You might not make it to morning. Adrian's rage crystallized into something sharp and deadly. What did you do? I unpacked. I stayed. Elena looked down at her hands. I thought it was one of your enemies. Someone who knew that leaving you would make me vulnerable. So I convinced myself it was safer to stay invisible in this marriage than visible outside of it. It wasn't my enemies, Adrian said quietly. It was Marcus. How can you be sure? Because he's the only one who would have known you were planning to leave. Adrian pulled up phone records, scanning for that time period. Did you tell anyone, your sister, a friend? Just you. I'd left a note on your pillow. Elena's eyes widened. But you never mentioned it. Because I never saw it. Adrian's voice had gone cold again. Marcus was in my apartment that night. I'd sent him to pick up some files. He must have found the note and made the call. The pieces were falling into place now, a picture of manipulation that stretched back months. Marcus inserting himself between them, rewriting their reality, turning protection into isolation and love into distance. We need to leave, Adrian said abruptly. If Marcus is watching the security feeds, he knows you've been here too long. We need to make this look real. What do you want me to do? Storm out. Be angry. Be hurt. Make it convincing. Adrian moved to his desk, pulling out the divorce papers Elena had left. I'll refuse to sign. You'll threaten legal action. He needs to believe this is the end. Elena nodded, understanding dawning in her eyes. And then? Then you disappear for a few days, somewhere Marcus can't track. Somewhere safe. Adrian wrote down an address on a piece of paper. This is a property I own under a shell corporation. No one knows about it except my attorney, and Patterson's loyal. You'll be protected there. What about you? I play the devastated husband. I lean on Marcus for support. I make him think he's won. Adrian's smile was cold, dangerous. And while he's celebrating, I dismantle every lie he's built. Elena took the paper, studied the address, then looked up at Adrian with an expression he couldn't quite read. If we do this, if we pretend to end things, there's a possibility we actually do end things. You understand that? I know. And you're willing to risk it? Adrian was quiet for a moment, weighing honesty against strategy, vulnerability against control. Then he made a choice. The choice he should have made 3 years ago. I'd rather risk losing you honestly than keep you through manipulation, he said. Even if Marcus hadn't interfered, you were right to want to leave. I failed you. I chose fear over trust, control over partnership. If we survive this, if we get through whatever Marcus has planned, I don't expect you to stay. I just want you to have the choice. A real choice, made with real information. Elena's eyes glistened, but she blinked back tears. Okay, let's do this. They stood there for a moment, two people separated by 3 years of distance and lies, connected by something that might have been love if either of them had been brave enough to nurture it. Then Elena's expression hardened, shifted into something fierce and determined. When she spoke, Her voice rang out loud enough to be picked up by the office microphones Marcus was undoubtedly monitoring. I don't care about your excuses, Adrian. I don't care about your reasons or your justifications. I'm done being invisible in my own marriage. Adrian matched her tone, letting his own frustration show. You're overreacting. We can work through this. Work through what? You won't even admit there's a problem. Elena grabbed the divorce papers, waving them in the air. I'm not asking anymore. I'm telling you. Sign these or my lawyer will make your life hell. I won't sign. Then I'll see you in court. Elena stormed toward the door, then paused, looking back at him one last time. This moment wasn't for Marcus. It was for them. A silent acknowledgement of what they were about to do, the risk they were taking. Then she was gone, the door slamming behind her with a finality that echoed through the empty office. Adrian stood there for a moment, listening to the silence, feeling the weight of 3 years of failures pressing down on him. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. Patterson, I need you to prepare documentation for transferring certain assets. He paused. And I need you to do it quietly. No one can know, especially not Marcus. His attorney's voice came through crisp and professional. What kind of assets? Everything. I want Elena protected no matter what happens. If Marcus is planning something, if this goes wrong, she walks away clean and safe. Boss, what's going on? I'm fixing mistakes, Adrian said quietly, starting with thinking I could control everything. He ended the call and walked to the windows, looking out at the city he'd conquered through strategy and force. Somewhere down there, Elena was following his instructions, disappearing into safety. And somewhere else, Marcus was watching, believing his manipulation had finally succeeded. But Adrian hadn't built an empire by being easy to break, and he sure as hell wasn't going to lose his wife without a fight. The war had just begun. The safe house sat tucked between 2 commercial buildings in Brooklyn, unremarkable enough that no one would look twice. Elena had arrived 20 minutes ago, checking the locks 3 times before finally allowing herself to sink onto the leather couch in the sparsely furnished living room. Her hands still trembled from the adrenaline of the performance in Adrian's office, from the weight of understanding just how thoroughly Marcus had invaded their lives. She pulled out her phone, staring at the screen. No messages. No calls. Adrian had been clear they couldn't communicate normally, not when Marcus likely had access to everything. But the silence felt suffocating, pressing against her chest with the same weight as the last 3 years of loneliness. A knock at the door made her jump to her feet, heart racing. She moved to the window, peering through the gap in the curtains. A man in his 50s stood on the doorstep, carrying a briefcase, his gray hair perfectly groomed despite the late hour. Mrs. Voss, it's Jonathan Patterson. Adrian sent me. Elena recognized the name. Adrian's personal attorney, one of the few people he genuinely trusted. She opened the door cautiously, studying Patterson's face for any sign of deception. After Marcus, she wasn't sure she could trust her own judgment anymore. May I come in? Patterson asked gently. I have some documents that require your signature and information Adrian wanted me to relay personally. Elena stepped aside, letting him enter. Patterson moved with the careful precision of someone who'd spent decades navigating dangerous legal waters, setting his briefcase on the coffee table before sitting in the armchair across from her. First, I need you to understand something, Patterson said, meeting her eyes directly. Whatever Adrian told you about Marcus, it's worse than he knows. I've been investigating on my own for the past 6 weeks. Why? Elena asked. What made you suspicious? Adrian asked me to transfer certain assets into your name 3 months ago. Nothing dramatic, just standard protection measures. But when I processed the paperwork, I noticed discrepancies in previous transfers. Money moving in ways that didn't match Adrian's usual patterns. Patterson opened his briefcase, pulling out a thick folder. Someone had been accessing Adrian's accounts, making small transfers that were designed to look legitimate. The amounts were modest enough not to trigger alerts, but over 2 years they totaled nearly $4 million. Elena's breath caught. Marcus? The trail points to him, though he was careful to obscure the connections. The money flowed through shell corporations and offshore accounts before eventually landing in a trust controlled by the Castellano family. Patterson handed her a document showing the financial pathway, each transfer highlighted and annotated. But here's what concerns me most. The transfers accelerated 6 months ago, right around the time you first tried to leave. Elena studied the documents, her mind racing. He was building a war chest. More than that, he was creating evidence of embezzlement that could be traced back to Adrian if needed. Insurance, in case his primary plan failed. Patterson pulled out another set of papers. These are the divorce papers you filed today. I need you to sign them. What? Elena looked up sharply. I thought we were pretending. You need to actually file them. Make it legally binding and public. Patterson's expression was grave. Because Marcus is going to come after you, Elena. Not immediately, but soon. And when he does, you need legal separation from Adrian's assets and liabilities. If anything happens to Adrian, nothing's going to happen to him. Elena's voice came out fierce, surprising even herself. Patterson's expression softened slightly. I've worked for Adrian for 12 years. I've seen him face down federal prosecutors, rival syndicates, and situations that would break most men. But I've never seen him scared until today, when he called me about protecting you. Whatever's between you two, broken or not, he loves you enough to make sure you survive this. Elena's throat tightened. He has a strange way of showing it. He does, but growing up the way he did, in the world he inhabits, love means keeping people alive, even if it means pushing them away. Patterson paused, choosing his words carefully. His father was murdered when Adrian was 16. Shot in front of their home because someone wanted to send a message. His mother died 6 months later from a heart attack, though Adrian always believed it was grief that killed her. He learned early that caring about people made them targets. He never told me any of that, Elena whispered, because telling you would mean admitting he cares, and admitting he cares means acknowledging you could be hurt because of him. Patterson handed her a pen. Sign the papers, Elena. Let him protect you the only way he knows how. Elena took the pen with shaking hands, staring down at her signature line on the divorce petition. 3 years of marriage ending with a stroke of ink. But it wasn't really ending, was it? It was transforming into something else. Partnership forged in crisis. Trust built on brutal honesty instead of protective lies. She signed. Patterson gathered the documents efficiently, sliding them back into his briefcase. I'll file these first thing tomorrow morning. It'll be public record by noon. Marcus will know. What happens then? Then we wait for him to make his move. Patterson stood, preparing to leave. Adrian will reach out when it's safe. Until then, stay here. Don't contact anyone from your previous life. Friends, family, colleagues. Marcus has likely compromised all of those connections. My sister is being watched. Adrian has someone keeping her safe, but you can't communicate with her directly. Patterson's expression turned sympathetic. I know this is hard, but Marcus has been planning this for years. We need to be smarter, more patient. Elena nodded, feeling the weight of isolation settling over her again. But this time it was different. This time she wasn't alone because Adrian had pushed her away. She was alone because they were fighting together, even from a distance. After Patterson left, Elena explored the safe house more thoroughly. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen stocked with basics, a bathroom with fresh towels. Everything functional but impersonal, designed for temporary survival rather than actual living. She found a laptop in one of the bedrooms, password protected but with a note taped to the screen in Adrian's angular handwriting. Password, October 17th. Elena. The date meant nothing to her at first. Then she remembered. October 17th, 3 years ago. The day they'd met, when she'd been working as a consultant for a tech company Adrian was acquiring. He'd walked into the conference room 20 minutes late, and she'd been the only person willing to call him on it. You're late, she'd said, not looking up from her presentation materials. I'm Adrian Voss. I'm never late. Meetings start when I arrive. Then you should update your calendar to reflect that. The rest of us have been waiting. The room had gone silent, everyone expecting an explosion. Instead, Adrian had laughed, actually laughed, and sat down to listen to her presentation with more attention than he'd shown anything in months. Elena entered the password, and the laptop opened to a secure desktop. Only one folder sat on the screen, labeled simply Truth. She clicked it open and found herself staring at years of surveillance footage, financial records, and documented evidence of Marcus's manipulation. Adrian had been investigating too, quietly, carefully, gathering ammunition. The first video was time-stamped from 2 years ago, Marcus in Adrian's office when Adrian was out of town, accessing the personal safe where Adrian kept private documents. Elena watched as Marcus photographed papers, copied files, moved through Adrian's space with the confidence of someone who believed he was untouchable. Another video showed Marcus meeting with men Elena recognized from the fabricated photos, actual Castellano associates. But the conversation wasn't what she expected. Marcus wasn't reporting intelligence or coordinating attacks. He was negotiating his own position, promising to deliver Adrian's empire in exchange for control of certain territories. Marcus wasn't a loyal soldier gone rogue. He was an opportunist who'd been playing both sides from the beginning. Elena spent hours watching the footage, reading through financial records that showed the scope of Marcus's betrayal. The pattern was clear. He'd been systematically weakening Adrian's position while strengthening his own, positioning himself to take over the moment Adrian was vulnerable enough. And destroying the marriage had been key to that vulnerability. Adrian's strength came from his absolute control over his emotions, his ability to make decisions based on pure strategy rather than feeling. But a man going through a devastating divorce, convinced his wife had betrayed him. That man might make mistakes, might lash out at the wrong enemies, might create openings that Marcus could exploit. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Elena's pulse quickened until she read the message. "It's me. This line is secure. Are you safe?" Adrian. Relief flooded through her, so intense it made her hands shake as she typed back. "Yes, Patterson came. I signed the papers." "I know. Thank you for trusting me." Elena stared at those words, emotion welling up in her chest. When had anyone in her marriage thanked her for trust? When had Adrian acknowledged that trust was something that needed to be given rather than commanded? "What happens now?" she typed. "Marcus came to see me an hour ago, brought the fabricated evidence, played the concerned friend perfectly. Did you confront him?" "No, I played devastated. Let him think I believe you betrayed me. Let him think I'm falling apart." Elena could picture it. Adrian's controlled grief, the careful performance of a man whose world was crumbling. Marcus wouldn't see through it because Marcus believed he understood Adrian's weaknesses. He'd spent 5 years studying them, after all. "He's going to escalate," Adrian's next message read. "Now that he thinks I'm isolated, he'll push harder. Make his move for control. I need you to be ready." "Ready for what?" "To be bait." The words sent ice through Elena's veins. Before she could respond, another message came through. "I won't ask you to do it, won't manipulate you into agreeing, but if you're willing, we can end this faster, draw him out into the open where we can expose him." Elena thought about the past 3 years, the loneliness that had carved hollows in her chest, the way she'd felt invisible in her own life. Then she thought about the phone call 6 months ago, the threat that had kept her trapped in a marriage she'd been ready to leave. Marcus had stolen years from her, had poisoned something that might have been beautiful if either she or Adrian had been brave enough to fight for it earlier. "Tell me the plan," she typed. Adrian's response took longer this time, as if he was weighing how much truth to share, how much danger to acknowledge. "Marcus has been tracking you since you left the tower. He knows you're in Brooklyn, probably has eyes on the building. When you leave tomorrow, he'll follow. I need you to lead him somewhere public, somewhere he can't act without witnesses. And then I confront him with evidence, make him choose between running or fighting. Either way, we expose him to the organization. Let everyone see what he's been doing." "What if he runs?" "He won't. He's too invested in this, too close to getting everything he's worked for." Adrian paused. "But Elena, if I'm wrong, if he tries to hurt you before I can get there, I can handle myself." Elena typed the words before she could second-guess them. "Tell me where to go and when." The plan came through in detailed messages over the next 20 minutes. Elena would leave the safe house at 10 a.m., take a specific route through Manhattan that would give Marcus multiple opportunities to make a move. She'd end up at Bryant Park, a public space with enough witnesses to keep her relatively safe, but secluded enough that Marcus might feel bold. Adrian would be watching the entire time, coordinating with the few people he trusted absolutely. If Marcus took the bait, if he approached her or tried to threaten her, they'd have him on camera, with witnesses, creating evidence that couldn't be fabricated away. "Get some sleep," Adrian's final message read. "Tomorrow, we end this." but sleep felt impossible. Elena lay in the unfamiliar bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about all the moments that had led here. The distance Adrian had maintained, the coldness she'd interpreted as indifference, the loneliness that had slowly hollowed her out. All of it orchestrated by a man who'd recognized their greatest vulnerability. Not that Adrian was powerful, but that he was terrified of caring too much. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Adrian, sent at 2 a.m. I know I have no right to ask this, but when this is over, if we both survive, would you consider coffee? Just coffee. A conversation where we're honest about everything. No strategy, no protection, no walls. Just two people trying to figure out if there's anything real underneath all the damage. Elena read the message 3 times, tears burning in her eyes. This was Adrian without armor, asking for something he'd never allowed himself to want openly. Yes, she typed back simply. The response came immediately, as if he'd been waiting, unable to sleep either. Thank you. Now get some rest. I need you sharp tomorrow. Elena smiled despite everything, despite the fear and uncertainty and risk. There was something intimate about this, coordinating in the dark, trusting each other with truth instead of protective lies. She finally drifted off around 4 a.m., dreaming of coffee shops and honest conversations and a version of her marriage that might have existed if they'd both been braver from the start. Morning came too quickly. Elena dressed carefully, jeans and a sweater, comfortable shoes for moving fast if needed. She pulled her hair back in a ponytail, applied minimal makeup, tried to look like a woman running errands rather than setting a trap. At exactly 10 a.m., she left the safe house. The Brooklyn street was busy with morning traffic, people heading to work or weekend activities. Elena walked with purpose, but not panic, following the route Adrian had mapped out. Subway to Manhattan, surface streets through Midtown, casual window shopping that would give Marcus opportunities to approach. She felt him before she saw him, that prickle of awareness that came from being watched. A glance in a store window showed a man in a dark jacket maintaining distance but keeping pace. Not Marcus himself, but someone working for him. A soldier following orders. Elena continued walking, letting him track her, leading him exactly where Adrian wanted her to go. Bryant Park appeared ahead, its winter gardens bare but the central lawn still populated with New Yorkers enjoying the cold sunshine. She found a bench near the fountain, sat down, pulled out her phone, waited. Marcus appeared 15 minutes later, and Elena's breath caught. He walked with the confidence of a man who believed he'd already won, his expensive coat and polished shoes marking him as someone important. He sat on the bench beside her without asking, close enough that anyone watching would think they knew each other. Mrs. Voss, he said pleasantly. Fancy meeting you here. Elena forced herself to meet his eyes, to show no fear. What do you want, Marcus? To talk about your husband, about the difficult position you've put yourself in. Marcus smiled, and it was the smile of a predator who'd cornered prey. You filed for divorce this morning, very publicly. Adrian's enemies are going to see that as opportunity, a scorned wife with insider knowledge. I don't know anything about his business. Don't you? Marcus leaned back, completely at ease. 3 years of marriage, and you expect me to believe he kept you completely separate? You're smarter than that, Elena, and unfortunately for you, so are the people who might want to use you against him. Is that a threat? It's reality. Adrian can't protect you anymore. You've made sure of that by leaving him. Marcus's voice dropped lower. But I can help. I have resources, connections. I can make sure you're safe, make sure no one comes after you for information or revenge. In exchange for what? The truth about what you know, bank accounts, safe houses, names of Adrian's closest allies. Small things that wouldn't hurt him directly, but would help me protect the organization's interests during this difficult transition. Elena stared at him, recognizing the manipulation even as he delivered it. Marcus was offering protection from threats he'd probably created, asking for information he could use to dismantle Adrian's empire piece by piece. I need to think about it, she said carefully. Of course. But don't take too long. Things are moving quickly. Marcus stood, straightening his coat. I'll be in touch. And Elena, don't try to contact Adrian. He's not in a rational state right now. Might do something he'd regret if he thinks you're in danger. He walked away, disappearing into the crowd with the ease of someone who'd orchestrated countless operations. Elena sat frozen on the bench, her heart racing, wondering if Adrian had gotten everything on camera, if the plan was working. Her phone buzzed. "We have it all. Audio, video, witnesses who saw him approach you unprompted. Stay there, I'm 10 minutes away." Elena breathed out slowly, relief mixing with residual fear. Marcus had revealed himself, had offered her a devil's bargain that proved he was actively working against Adrian's interests. It was evidence, concrete, and undeniable. But it was also a declaration of war. 8 minutes later, Adrian appeared. Elena saw him across the park, moving through the crowd with that controlled intensity that made people unconsciously step aside. He wore dark jeans and a leather jacket instead of his usual suits, hair slightly disheveled like he'd been running his hands through it. He looked almost human, almost vulnerable. Adrian sat where Marcus had been moments before, and the contrast struck Elena viscerally. Marcus had sat close enough to intimidate. Adrian left careful space between them, respecting boundaries even now. "You were perfect," Adrian said quietly, exactly the right balance of fear and defiance. "I wasn't acting." Elena's voice shook slightly. "He scared me." "Good. That means your instincts are working." Adrian pulled out his phone, showing her the footage his team had captured. Crystal clear video of Marcus making his offer, audio picking up every word. "This is enough to move against him officially. Bring in federal authorities, cooperate with ongoing investigations into the Castellanos." "But," Elena heard the hesitation in his voice, "but going official means exposure, months of depositions and trials and media coverage. Your life becomes public record. Every detail of our marriage, every connection I have, all of it dragged into court." Adrian met her eyes. "I won't make that choice for you. If you want to walk away now, take the divorce settlement and disappear. I'll handle Marcus quietly. Make him vanish without the spectacle." Elena studied his face, seeing the exhaustion around his eyes, the tension in his jaw. "You'd let him get away with it? Just to protect me from publicity?" "I'd burn my entire empire to keep you safe." The words came out raw, honest in a way Adrian never allowed himself to be. "I spent 3 years trying to protect you by pushing you away. Maybe that was wrong. Maybe I should have trusted you to make your own choices, handle your own risks. But I can't. I can't be the reason you get hurt. Not again." "Adrian." Elena reached out, placing her hand over his on the bench between them. The touch was electric, 3 years of distance collapsing in an instant. "I'm already hurt." Marcus made sure of that. "He stole years from us, poisoned something that could have been real. I'm not walking away from that. I'm not letting him win." Adrian's hand turned under hers, fingers interlacing. "You understand what you're signing up for? The attention, the danger, the possibility that this all goes wrong?" "I understand that I'm tired of being invisible. Tired of letting fear make my choices." Elena squeezed his hand. "We do this together, publicly. We show Marcus and everyone else that they can't manipulate us anymore." Something shifted in Adrian's expression, relief mixed with respect, vulnerability mixing with renewed determination. "Okay, together." They sat there for a moment, hands linked on a park bench in the middle of Manhattan, two people who'd spent years circling each other finally choosing to stand side by side. Adrian's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and his expression hardened. "Marcus just accessed my personal office. He's moving faster than I expected." "What's he looking for?" "Proof that I suspect him. Evidence I've been gathering." Adrian stood, pulling Elena to her feet. "I need to get back before he finds it. Are you comfortable staying at the safe house for a few more hours?" "No." Elena's voice was firm. "I'm coming with you." "Elena, we just agreed. Together." She met his eyes with the same defiance she'd shown 3 years ago when she'd called him late to a meeting. "You don't get to make unilateral decisions about my safety anymore. If Marcus is making his move, I want to be there when you confront him." Adrian looked like he wanted to argue, protective instinct warring with newfound respect for her agency. Finally, he nodded. "Stay behind me. Do exactly what I say. If things go bad—" "They won't," Elena said with more confidence than she felt. They took a car service back to the Voss Tower, Adrian making calls during the ride to position his most trusted people strategically. Elena listened to him work, recognizing the tactical brilliance that had built an empire, seeing now how that same strategic mind had convinced itself that isolation equaled protection. The tower lobby was busy with afternoon traffic, business people and residents moving through without noticing the tension thrumming between Adrian and Elena. They rode the elevator in silence, watching floor numbers climb toward the penthouse. The doors opened to chaos. Adrian's office had been ransacked, drawers pulled open, files scattered, his computer pulled apart. And in the center of it all stood Marcus, holding a small leather journal that Elena recognized as Adrian's personal notes. "Looking for something?" Adrian's voice was ice-cold, dangerous. Marcus turned slowly, and for the first time, Elena saw genuine emotion on his face. Not the pleasant mask he usually wore, but raw fury mixed with satisfaction. "I was wondering when you'd figure it out," Marcus said. "Took you long enough." 5 years. Adrian moved into the office, and Elena felt the temperature drop with his controlled rage. 5 years of planning, manipulating, stealing. What did they promise you? Territory? Money? Power? All of it. Marcus smiled. The Castellanos recognized what you couldn't, that loyalty without ambition is wasted potential. They offered me partnership, a real seat at the table, not just playing guard dog to your empire. So you decided to destroy me from the inside. I decided to take what should have been mine from the start. Marcus gestured at the office, the tower, the city beyond. You built this on ruthlessness and strategy, but you forgot the most important rule. Never trust anyone completely. I've been preparing for this moment since the day I walked through your door. Then you know I've been preparing too. Adrian pulled out his phone, tapping the screen once. The office monitors flickered to life, showing footage of Marcus's meetings with the Castellanos, his embezzlement, his manipulation of Elena and Adrian's marriage. Marcus's confidence flickered. That proves nothing. It proves everything: financial crimes, conspiracy, fraud, and that's before we get to the personal threats. Adrian's voice went even colder. You called my wife 6 months ago, threatened her life if she left me. That's on record now too. You can't prove. I can prove all of it. Adrian stepped closer. The question is whether I destroy you legally or simply make you disappear. I haven't decided yet. Marcus's hand moved toward his jacket, and Elena's heart stopped. But Adrian was faster, pulling a gun from his own holster with the casual efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. Don't. Adrian's voice was absolutely calm. I'm offering you one choice, Marcus. One chance to walk away alive. You leave the city, leave the organization, leave everything you've built here, disappear completely. Or I show this evidence to the Castellanos and let them handle you for being a failed asset. Your call. The office went silent except for the hum of the monitors, footage of Marcus's betrayal playing on loop. Marcus looked between Adrian and Elena, and something like recognition crossed his face. You're together. Actually together now. I didn't think... He laughed bitterly. I thought destroying the marriage would break you. Instead, it just made you both stronger. Last chance, Adrian said. Walk away or face consequences. Marcus straightened his jacket, that pleasant mask sliding back into place even as his eyes burned with hatred. This isn't over. Yes, it is. Adrian's gun never wavered. You have 24 hours to leave the city. After that, every law enforcement agency and criminal organization on the East Coast gets a copy of everything I have. You'll have nowhere to hide. Marcus walked to the door, pausing beside Elena. He'll disappoint you eventually. It's what he does best. Maybe, Elena said calmly, but at least it'll be his choice, not yours. Marcus left without another word, and the office seemed to exhale. Adrian lowered his gun, exhaustion washing over his features. Is it really over? Elena asked quietly. The immediate threat? Yes. Marcus will run. He's smart enough to know when he's beaten. Adrian set the gun down, turning to face her fully. But the damage he did, to us, to the organization, that's going to take time to repair. Then we have time. Elena moved closer. No more distance. No more protecting me by pushing me away. We do the hard work of actually trying. Adrian reached out slowly, giving her time to pull back before cupping her face with both hands. I don't know how to do this. How to be vulnerable and still keep you safe. We figure it out together. Elena leaned into his touch. That's what partnership means. Adrian kissed her then, and it was nothing like the careful, controlled kisses from their wedding or the rare moments of physical connection during their marriage. This was desperate and honest, 3 years of distance collapsing into heat and need and possibility. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Adrian pressed his forehead to hers. I'm still going to mess this up, he whispered. I'm still going to default to control and strategy. And I'm still going to call you on it. Still going to demand honesty and respect in actual partnership. Elena smiled. We're going to fight and struggle and probably fail sometimes, but we'll do it together. Outside the windows, Manhattan glittered in afternoon sunlight, a city full of dangers and opportunities and possibilities. Inside, two people who'd spent years protecting themselves from each other finally chose vulnerability instead. It wasn't an ending, it was barely a beginning, but it was real, and that was enough. The kiss lingered in the air between them even after they pulled apart, a promise of something fragile and new. But reality crashed back quickly when Adrian's phone buzzed with incoming messages, each one pulling him back into the world of strategy and consequences. Marcus is on the move, Adrian said, reading the updates from his security team. He withdrew $500,000 in cash 20 minutes ago, passport flagged at 3 different airports. Elena watched him shift back into tactical mode, saw the walls trying to rebuild themselves. She reached out and placed her hand on his arm, feeling the tension coiled there. Don't, she said quietly. Adrian looked at her, confusion flickering across his features. Don't what? Don't disappear on me again. Don't let this crisis turn you back into the man who keeps everyone at a distance. Elena stepped closer, maintaining that physical connection. We just promised each other honesty. That starts now, not after everything's resolved. Adrian's jaw worked as he processed this, years of habit warring with newfound commitment. Finally, he exhaled slowly and set his phone down. You're right. I'm sorry. It's instinct. When threats appear, I isolate and strategize. I know, but I'm not asking you to stop strategizing. I'm asking you to let me in while you do it. Elena gestured to the monitors still displaying Marcus's betrayal. What's your next move? The question seemed to surprise him, as if he'd expected her to want distance from the ugliness of his world. But Elena had made her choice in Bryant Park. She was done being protected through ignorance. Damage control, Adrian said after a moment. Marcus had access to sensitive information for 5 years. I need to determine what he might have compromised, who he might have turned against me, what traps he might have set before running. How do you do that? Carefully. Adrian pulled up files on his computer despite the chaos Marcus had created. I call a meeting with my inner circle, the people I trust absolutely. We go through every operation, every asset, every connection Marcus touched. Find the poison before it spreads. When? Tonight. The longer I wait, the more damage he can do remotely. Adrian paused, then made a decision that clearly cost him. I want you there. Elena blinked. At the meeting? You said partnership. That means you see all of it. The good, the bad, the ugly truth of how this empire actually functions. Adrian's voice was steady, but his eyes held uncertainty. But I need you to understand what you're agreeing to. These aren't corporate executives. Some of them are dangerous people who've done terrible things. If you want to be part of my life, really part of it, you need to see who I am when I'm not pretending to be legitimate. The offer hung between them, weighted with significance. Adrian was offering her the one thing he'd never given before, complete transparency. No protective distance, no sanitized version of his world, just raw truth. Okay, Elena said simply. Adrian studied her face as if searching for hesitation or fear. Finding none, he pulled out his phone and started making calls. Elena listened as he summoned people with code names and careful language, setting a meeting for 8 p.m. at a location he referenced only as the warehouse. Between calls, he looked at her with something like wonder. You're not afraid. I'm terrified, Elena admitted. But I'm more afraid of going back to being invisible, of losing this chance because I chose comfort over truth. Adrian crossed to her, taking both her hands in his. If at any point you want out of the meeting, of this life, of us, you say the word. No judgment, no consequences. Just clean separation and everything I promised in the divorce settlement. Stop offering me exit strategies, Elena said, but her voice was gentle. I'm choosing to stay. Trust that I mean it. The concept seemed foreign to him, trusting someone's commitment without constant verification. But he nodded slowly, then glanced at his watch. We have 4 hours before the meeting. You should eat something. Rest if you can. What are you going to do? Prepare. Review files, anticipate questions, make sure I have answers for everything they'll ask. Adrian hesitated, then added, You could stay here. Watch me work. Ask questions if you want. It was such a small offer, but it represented a seismic shift. Adrian had spent 3 years keeping his work completely separate from their marriage, maintaining that wall between his two worlds. Now he was inviting her to sit in the same room while he operated, making himself vulnerable to observation and judgment. Elena settled onto the leather couch that faced his desk, watching as Adrian worked through the chaos Marcus had created. He moved with focused intensity, sorting through scattered files and making notes in a leather journal, identical to the one Marcus had been holding. Every so often he would glance at her as if confirming she was still there, still choosing to witness this version of him. What are you thinking? Adrian asked after 20 minutes of silence. That you're different when you work, Elena said honestly. More alive. Like this is where you're most yourself. And does that self frighten you? Elena considered the question seriously. Parts of it do. The violence implied in some of these files, the moral compromises, the people who've been hurt by your decisions. But I'm not naive enough to think power comes clean, and I'm not naive enough to think I'm marrying a saint. We're not married anymore, Adrian pointed out quietly. The divorce was filed this morning. Legally separated, Elena corrected. Not divorced yet. There's a mandatory waiting period in New York. 120 days. Adrian's voice carried an emotion she couldn't quite identify. And after that? We figure it out. Maybe we remarry. Maybe we don't. Maybe we create something entirely new that doesn't fit traditional definitions. Elena met his eyes across the office. But we do it honestly, with full knowledge of who we both are. Adrian returned to his files, but Elena saw the slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. They worked in companionable silence for the next hour, Adrian sorting evidence while Elena read through documents he passed her, learning the scope of his empire for the first time. The organization was larger than she'd imagined, more diversified. Legitimate businesses, shipping companies, real estate holdings, tech investments, woven through with gray market operations that lived in legal ambiguity, gambling, high-end security services, information brokerage. Adrian had built something that existed in the spaces between legal and illegal, powerful enough to influence but legitimate enough to survive scrutiny. You're frowning, Adrian observed. I'm trying to reconcile the scale of this with the man who couldn't tell me he loved me. Elena looked up from a financial report. You manage billions in assets, coordinate hundreds of people, navigate complex legal and illegal operations. But you couldn't have one honest conversation with your wife. Business is simple, Adrian said. You identify goals, assess risks, execute strategy. Emotions are, he paused, searching for words, unpredictable, uncontrollable, dangerous. And you hate feeling out of control. Yes. The admission came easier now. Control keeps people alive. Control maintains order. When I let emotions drive decisions, people die. I learned that lesson young and learned it permanently. Elena thought of what Patterson had told her about Adrian's parents, the violence that had shaped his understanding of love and vulnerability. What happened to the people who killed your father? Adrian's expression went cold, remote. They died, slowly, painfully. I was 17 when I found them. You killed them yourself? Yes. No hesitation, no remorse. And I'd do it again. They took something irreplaceable from me, thought they could send a message by spilling his blood on our doorstep. I sent a clear message back. This was the darkness Elena had sensed in him, the capacity for violence that lurked beneath the expensive suits and cultivated sophistication. Most women would have recoiled, but Elena had spent 3 years married to shadows and implications. Somehow the brutal honesty felt cleaner than the careful distance. Do you regret it? She asked. No, but I regret what it turned me into. Adrian set down the file he'd been holding. After I killed them, after I watched them beg and suffer, I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no horror, no emotion at all. Just emptiness. And I realized that emptiness was safer than feeling, safer than caring about anything enough to be destroyed when it was taken away. So you chose numbness. I chose survival, built an empire on that numbness, on the ability to make hard decisions without emotional interference. Adrian moved around the desk, sitting beside her on the couch. But then I met you, and suddenly the numbness didn't work anymore. I'd see you reading in our apartment and feel something crack in my chest. You'd smile at something mundane, and I'd forget whatever strategy I'd been planning. You made me feel again, and it terrified me. Elena's throat tightened with emotion. So you pushed me away. So I convinced myself that distance was protection. That if I didn't let you all the way in, if I kept our marriage surface level and strategic, then losing you wouldn't destroy me. Adrian laughed bitterly. But I was losing you anyway, just slowly, watching you fade into loneliness instead of risking the quick pain of actually trying. We're trying now, Elena said, taking his hand. We are, and I'm still terrified. Adrian's fingers tightened around hers. What if I can't change? What if I default to control every time things get difficult? Then we deal with it. We fight, we talk, we work through it. Elena shifted closer. Adrian, I'm not asking for perfection. I'm asking for effort, for honesty when you're struggling instead of silence, for partnership instead of protection. Adrian pulled her closer, and Elena let herself lean into him, feeling the solid warmth of his body against hers. They sat like that for long minutes, two people learning how to be present with each other after years of careful distance. We should go, Adrian said eventually, checking his watch. The meeting's in an hour. We need to get to the warehouse. Elena nodded and stood, but Adrian caught her hand before she could move away. Thank you, he said quietly, for choosing to stay, for seeing the worst of me and not running. I haven't seen the worst yet, Elena pointed out. No, you haven't. Adrian's expression was grave. Tonight you will. Some of the people at this meeting, they're not good men, Elena. They've killed, they've hurt people, they've done things that would give you nightmares, and they respect me because I'm capable of the same. I know. Do you? Really? Adrian searched her face. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Once you understand exactly who I am and what I've done, there's no going back to comfortable ignorance. Elena thought about the past 3 years, the loneliness and doubt, the feeling of living with a stranger who wore her husband's face. Then she thought about the past 24 hours, the brutal honesty and genuine connection, the feeling of finally being seen. I'd rather have uncomfortable truth than comfortable lies, she said firmly. Let's go. The warehouse sat in Red Hook, tucked between shipping containers and industrial buildings that had seen better decades. Adrian's driver pulled up to a nondescript entrance where 2 men in dark jackets stood guard. They nodded to Adrian with respect that bordered on fear, their eyes tracking Elena with careful curiosity. Inside, the warehouse had been converted into something resembling a corporate boardroom, long table, leather chairs, monitors on the walls. But the men gathered, there were nothing like corporate executives. Elena recognized the type from movies and news reports, hard faces, calculating eyes, bodies that moved with the controlled violence of predators. 8 men total, ranging in age from mid-30s to late 50s. They stood when Adrian entered, a gesture of respect that was clearly habitual, but their gazes locked on Elena with open surprise. "Gentlemen," Adrian said, his voice carrying the absolute authority that came from years of unquestioned leadership. "This is my wife, Elena. She'll be sitting in on this meeting." The surprise deepened to shock. One man, dark-haired, scar along his jaw, spoke up. "Boss, with respect, this is internal business, family business. We don't typically—" "I know what we typically do, Vincent." Adrian's tone was ice. "I'm changing protocol. Elena stays." The men exchanged glances, but no one argued further. They settled into chairs while Adrian took the head of the table, Elena beside him in a position that made her role clear. Not observer, but partner. "Marcus Vale is gone," Adrian began without preamble. Fled the city this afternoon after 5 years of working for the Castellanos, stealing from us, and attempting to destabilize my leadership. The reaction was immediate: curses, shock, one man's fist slamming the table. Vincent's scar went white as his face flushed with rage. "That son of a bitch," Vincent spat. "I trusted him with my crew's schedules, our safe house locations. If he gave that to the Castellanos?" "Assume he did," Adrian cut in. "Assume he compromised everything he touched. That's why we're here, to assess damage, relocate assets, and eliminate any traps he might have left behind." For the next 2 hours, Elena watched Adrian orchestrate the meeting with surgical precision. Each man reported on his area of responsibility: territory, operations, personnel, while Adrian cross-referenced against files Marcus would have accessed. It was like watching a chess master play multiple games simultaneously, tracking pieces and strategies across a complex board. Elena learned more about Adrian's empire in those 2 hours than in 3 years of marriage: the shipping operation that moved gray market goods through legitimate channels, the security firm that protected high-value clients while gathering intelligence, the information network that sold secrets to the highest bidder. Everything legal enough to withstand scrutiny, profitable enough to fund the operations that weren't. And through it all, Adrian maintained absolute control. When arguments broke out, his voice cut through them with quiet authority. When men grew heated or suggested violence, he redirected them towards strategy. He was calculating, ruthless, brilliant, and utterly in his element. "What about the offshore accounts?" asked a silver-haired man named Dominic. "Marcus had access to the transfer protocols. He could have drained millions before we noticed." "Already frozen and transferred," Adrian replied. "Patterson handled it this afternoon. New accounts, new access codes. Marcus got nothing." "You were ahead of him," Vincent said with grudging respect. "How long have you known?" 6 weeks that something was wrong, 24 hours that it was Marcus specifically. Adrian glanced at Elena. "My wife figured it out before I did." Every eye in the room turned to Elena, reassessing. She felt the weight of their attention, the danger inherent in these men, but refused to show fear. "How?" Vincent asked her directly. "Marcus made a mistake," Elena said, keeping her voice steady. "He impersonated Adrian over phone calls, thinking I wouldn't notice the difference. But I'm married to him. I know how he sounds when he's tired, when he's stressed, when he actually cares about what he's saying. Marcus got the words right, but the emotion wrong." "Smart," Dominic said after a moment. "Most people wouldn't notice that. They'd hear what they expected to hear." "Elena's not most people," Adrian said quietly, and there was pride in his voice that made something warm bloom in Elena's chest. The meeting continued, strategies forming to counter Marcus's potential moves. Men were reassigned, operations temporarily suspended, new security protocols implemented. Elena watched it all, understanding for the first time the full scope of what Adrian managed, the constant balancing act between power and survival. Near the end, Vincent raised a concern that made everyone tense. "Boss, the Castellanos are going to push now. They invested 5 years in Marcus, spent resources positioning him. When he ran instead of delivering, they're going to be pissed. We should expect retaliation." "I'm counting on it," Adrian said calmly. "Let them come. We're ready." "Are we?" Vincent's skepticism was clear. Marcus knew our defensive positions, our contingency plans. The Castellanos know them too now. They know what Marcus saw, not what I've been building independently. Adrian pulled up new files on the monitors, security arrangements Marcus had never accessed, alliances Marcus didn't know existed. Marcus was useful, but he was never essential. Every critical operation had redundancies he wasn't aware of. The room relaxed slightly, confidence returning. Adrian had been playing a deeper game than anyone realized, including Marcus. Even his betrayal had been anticipated and planned for. "What about personally?" asked a younger man who'd been mostly silent. "Marcus knew where you lived, your routines, your—" He glanced at Elena. "Vulnerabilities. If the Castellanos want to hit you where it hurts, then they'll find I've eliminated those vulnerabilities," Adrian said flatly. "Elena's safety is non-negotiable. I've already arranged protection, multiple safe locations, constant surveillance. Anyone who comes after her will regret it permanently." The casual mention of violence on her behalf should have frightened Elena. Instead, it felt almost comforting, not because she wanted Adrian to hurt people, but because he was being honest about the lengths he'd go to instead of hiding behind protective distance. The meeting concluded near midnight with clear assignments and renewed unity. As the men filed out, several of them nodded respectfully to Elena, accepting her presence in a way that felt significant. Vincent was the last to leave, pausing at the door. "Mrs. Voss," he said carefully, "for what it's worth, he's different when you're around. More human. We noticed he'd gone cold the past couple years, thought maybe that's just what happens when you run an empire this size, but tonight, seeing him with you here?" Vincent shrugged. "Just thought you should know. He's better with you than without you." After Vincent left, Elena and Adrian sat alone in the warehouse conference room, exhaustion settling over them both. Adrian loosened his tie, running a hand through his hair in a gesture of weariness that made him look younger, more vulnerable. "Well," he said, "you've officially seen the ugliest version of my life. Thoughts?" Elena considered her answer carefully. "It's not what I expected. More organized, more strategic, less impulsive violence. We save the impulsive violence for special occasions," Adrian said with dark humor. "What you saw tonight was the business side, clean, professional, focused on sustainability rather than chaos. And the other side, the Marcus side, where people die slowly and painfully." Adrian's expression hardened. "That side exists. I won't lie to you. When people cross certain lines, when they hurt what's mine, I'm capable of things that would horrify you." "Am I what's yours?" Elena asked quietly. The question hung between them, loaded with 3 years of complicated history. Adrian met her eyes with absolute focus. "You're not property, not possession, but you're mine in the sense that I would burn this entire empire to ash before I let anyone hurt you. You're mine in the sense that when Marcus threatened you, my first instinct was violence so complete it scared even me." Adrian paused. "Does that answer frighten you?" "Yes," Elena admitted, "but it also makes me feel protected in a way I never have before." "Is that wrong? To find comfort in the fact that you'd be ruthless on my behalf?" "I don't know. Normal morality doesn't really apply in this world." Adrian stood and held out his hand. "Come on, let's go home." The word home resonated with possibility. Not the empty apartment they'd shared for 3 years, maintaining separate lives under one roof, but an actual home, built on honesty and partnership. They drove back to Manhattan in comfortable silence, Elena's hand resting in Adrian's on the seat between them. The driver didn't react to this intimacy, but Elena noticed his slight smile in the rear-view mirror. Even the staff had noticed the shift. The penthouse apartment felt different when they entered together instead of in careful rotation. Adrian moved to pour them both whiskey while Elena kicked off her heels and curled onto the couch that overlooked the city lights. "What happens now?" she asked as Adrian handed her a glass and settled beside her. "Now we wait. Marcus will either disappear permanently or make one last desperate move. The Castellanos will either cut their losses or escalate conflict. And we," Adrian paused, considering, "we figure out how to actually build something real." "No more separate bedrooms," Elena said firmly. Adrian raised an eyebrow. "Is that a demand?" "It's a requirement. I'm not going back to living like polite strangers who happen to share an address." Elena sipped her whiskey, feeling its burn. "We sleep in the same room. We eat meals together. We talk about our days like normal couples do." "We're not a normal couple." "No. But we can try for the good parts of normal." Elena set down her glass and turned to face him fully. "I want you, Adrian. Not the controlled version who thinks emotions are weakness. Not the distant protector who makes unilateral decisions. I want the complicated, damaged, brilliant man who's capable of both ruthless violence and genuine tenderness. All of it." Adrian's control cracked, raw emotion flooding his features. He set his own glass down with shaking hands and pulled Elena close, kissing her with desperate intensity. She responded without hesitation. 3 years of loneliness and longing pouring into the connection. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. "I don't deserve you," he whispered. "Probably not," Elena agreed. "But you're stuck with me anyway." Adrian laughed, actually laughed, and the sound was so unexpected, so genuine that Elena felt tears burn her eyes. This was what she'd been missing, what Marcus had stolen from them. Not just physical intimacy or even emotional honesty, but simple moments of shared humanity. "Take me to bed," Elena said softly. "Our bed. Together." Adrian stood and lifted her into his arms, carrying her through the apartment to the master bedroom he'd occupied alone for 3 years. The room was masculine and spare, designed for function rather than comfort. But tonight it felt like possibility, like the beginning of something neither of them fully understood yet. They made love slowly, rediscovering each other after years of careful distance. Every touch was a question and an answer, every kiss a promise of trying. When Elena finally fell asleep in Adrian's arms, feeling his heartbeat steady beneath her ear, she felt something she hadn't experienced in their marriage before. Hope. Outside the windows, Manhattan never slept, its dangers and opportunities continuing their endless dance. And somewhere in that city, Marcus was running from consequences while the Castellanos plotted their next move. But for tonight, in this moment, Adrian and Elena had carved out something precious from the wreckage of their marriage, something honest and fragile and worth fighting for. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Tomorrow they'd face whatever came next. Tonight, they simply held each other and chose to believe that love could be stronger than fear. Morning sunlight cut through the bedroom windows, painting stripes across the tangled sheets where Elena and Adrian lay wrapped around each other. Elena woke first, disoriented by the unfamiliar warmth of another body beside her, the weight of Adrian's arm across her waist. For 3 years she'd woken alone in the guest bedroom, listening to Adrian move through the apartment like a ghost she happened to share space with. This was different. This was real. Adrian stirred beside her, consciousness returning slowly. His eyes opened and found hers immediately, and Elena saw the moment he remembered everything: the confrontation with Marcus, the warehouse meeting, the choice they'd made to stop running from each other. "Morning," she said softly. "Morning." Adrian's voice was rough with sleep, his guard still down in these first vulnerable moments of waking. "How long have you been awake?" "A few minutes. I was watching you sleep." That's either romantic or creepy, depending on context. But Adrian smiled as he said it, pulling her closer. "How are you feeling about last night?" Elena considered the question seriously. Terrified, hopeful, uncertain, all of it at once. "That's fair." Adrian pressed a kiss to her forehead. "I feel the same way." They lay there in comfortable silence for a few more minutes before reality intruded in the form of Adrian's phone buzzing insistently on the nightstand. He reached for it with obvious reluctance, scanning the messages with growing tension. "What is it?" Elena asked, watching his expression shift from soft to tactical. "Marcus. He's not running after all." Adrian sat up, already moving into crisis mode. "He hit one of our operations in Queens this morning, burned a warehouse, destroyed product worth close to $2 million. Elena felt ice settle in her stomach. "He's escalating. He's desperate, hitting us to prove to the Castellanos that he's still useful, that the investment in him wasn't wasted." Adrian was already out of bed, pulling on clothes with efficient speed. "I need to handle this." "Wait." Elena grabbed his arm before he could disappear into strategy and distance. "Don't shut me out. Tell me what you're thinking, what you're planning." Adrian paused, old instincts warring with new promises. Then he sat back down on the edge of the bed, taking her hand. "I'm thinking Marcus is trying to force my hand, make me reactive instead of strategic. He wants me angry enough to make mistakes." Adrian's voice was controlled, but Elena could hear the fury underneath. "I'm planning to give him exactly what he expects, a public, visible response that looks like rage but is actually a trap." "What kind of trap?" "Marcus knows how I operate. He knows I'd move hard and fast against anyone who damages my property. So I'll do exactly that. Mobilize my people, make a big show of hunting him down, let word spread that I'm out for blood." Adrian squeezed her hand. "But while everyone's watching the public response, I'll be working a quieter angle, finding where he's actually hiding, who's protecting him, what his real endgame is." "The Castellanos must know he's a liability now," Elena said, following the logic. "If he's acting without their approval, then they'll hang him out to dry. But if they're coordinating with him, if this attack was planned—" Adrian's expression darkened. "Then we're looking at open war, not just cleaning up a rogue operative." Elena absorbed this, understanding the stakes. "What do you need from me?" The question seemed to surprise Adrian. "You don't need to be involved in this part. This is the ugly side, the violence you saw hints of last night. I can handle—" "Stop." Elena's voice was firm. "We agreed. Partnership, not protection. If you're going into a potentially dangerous situation, I want to know about it. I want to help if I can, and I want you to come home to me when it's over. Adrian looked at her with something like wonder. Most people would be running right now, seeing the fire, the escalation, the very real possibility that this gets bloody. That's usually when civilians decide they want no part of this life. I'm not most people, and I'm not a civilian anymore. Elena met his eyes steadily. I'm your partner, so tell me the plan, all of it, and let me decide how I can help. Adrian was quiet for a long moment, processing this shift in their dynamic. Then he stood and held out his hand. Come on, I'll walk you through it over breakfast. They moved to the kitchen, and Elena watched Adrian prepare coffee with the same focused precision he brought to everything. He'd clearly been making his own breakfast for years, never expecting or asking her to play the role of domestic caretaker. It was one of the small things she'd actually appreciated during their distant marriage. He'd never demanded she perform traditional wife duties while giving her none of the actual intimacy of partnership. Marcus is staying somewhere in the city, Adrian began, setting a cup in front of her. He's too arrogant to run completely, and he needs proximity to the Castellanos to maintain whatever alliance he's building. My people are tracking his known associates, financial transactions, any digital footprint he's leaving. How long will that take? Could be hours, could be days. Depends on how careful he's being. Adrian leaned against the counter, his own coffee cradled in both hands. In the meantime, I need to manage the public response, show strength, maintain confidence among my people, make sure no one sees this attack as a sign of weakness they can exploit. And the quiet angle? I'm meeting with someone this afternoon, a contact who has connections to the Castellano family. Not loyal to them, but close enough to hear things. Adrian's voice dropped lower. If the Castellanos ordered this attack, if they're backing Marcus's play, I need to know before I make my next move. Elena understood what he wasn't saying directly. If this was sanctioned by the Castellanos, Adrian's response couldn't be limited to just Marcus. It would require a broader, more dangerous confrontation with the rival organization that had been circling his territory for years. This contact, Elena said carefully, can you trust them? As much as I trust anyone in this world, which is to say, only so far as our interests align. Adrian set down his coffee. But they owe me a favor, and in this business, debts get paid. I want to come with you. Adrian's expression shifted to immediate refusal, but Elena pressed on before he could voice it. Not to the meeting itself. I understand that would compromise your position, but I don't want to sit here alone, waiting and wondering if you're safe. Let me be nearby at least, please. Adrian started to argue, then stopped himself. Elena could see him wrestling with protective instinct versus the partnership he'd promised to build. Finally, he nodded slowly. You stay in the car with the driver. Armed security. You don't get out, you don't engage, you just exist as backup if things go wrong. Agreed. Elena felt relief wash through her. It wasn't much, but it was better than being shut out completely. Adrian's phone buzzed again, this time with a call. He glanced at the screen and his jaw tightened. It's Vincent. He answered on speaker, and Vincent's voice came through tense and urgent. Boss, we've got a problem. The fire in Queens, it wasn't just product. There were people in that warehouse. 2 of our guys doing inventory. Elena watched the color drain from Adrian's face. Are they, one's critical, others stable, both at Mount Sinai, under assumed names. Vincent's voice was hard with barely controlled rage. This wasn't just about property damage. Marcus wanted blood. Where are you now? Adrian asked, his voice deadly calm in that way Elena was learning meant he was absolutely furious. At the hospital with their families. They want to know what you're going to do about this. Tell them I'm handling it. Medical expenses covered, families protected, and Marcus will answer for this personally. Adrian's tone left no room for doubt. I'll be there in an hour. He ended the call and stood motionless for a moment, hands braced on the counter, breathing carefully controlled. Elena moved to him slowly, placing her hand on his back. I'm going to kill him, Adrian said quietly. Not quickly, not cleanly. I'm going to make Marcus suffer for this. Elena didn't flinch from the violence in his voice. Will that help those men? Their families? No. but it'll send a message that you don't attack my people without consequences. Adrian turned to face her, and his eyes were cold with the kind of rage that had built an empire. This is who I am, Elena. When someone crosses this line, I don't just neutralize the threat, I make an example, so that everyone watching understands what happens when you come after what's mine. I know. Elena held his gaze steadily. And I'm not asking you to be someone you're not. I'm just asking you to remember that revenge feels satisfying in the moment, but strategy keeps you alive long term. Adrian's expression shifted slightly, the cold fury banking into something more controlled. You're right. Marcus wants me reactive, wants me to come at him with pure rage. That's when I'll make mistakes. So don't give him what he wants. Be strategic. Be smart. Elena moved closer. Make him pay. But do it in a way that protects you and everyone who depends on you. Adrian pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against his chest. Elena could feel his heart racing, could sense the violence coiled in his muscles. But he was listening, actually considering her words instead of just disappearing into tactical isolation. I need to go to the hospital, he said into her hair. Face those families, look them in the eye, and promise them justice. I'll come with you. Elena, those men got hurt because Marcus was targeting you. Their families deserve to see that you're not hiding, that you're facing this head on. And they deserve to know you have support, that you're not some isolated dictator making decisions alone. Elena pulled back to look at him. Let me be there, not as decoration or trophy, but as your actual partner. Adrian studied her face, and Elena saw the moment he made the decision to trust her fully. Okay, but we do this carefully. Hospital means exposure, potential vulnerability. Security stays tight. They prepared quickly, Adrian making calls to arrange protection while Elena dressed in something appropriate for a hospital visit. Dark slacks and a simple sweater, understated but respectful. The drive to Mount Sinai was tense, Adrian's security team maintaining tight formation around their car. The hospital's VIP wing had been quietly cleared, Vincent and several other members of Adrian's organization maintaining a perimeter that hospital security had wisely chosen not to challenge. When Adrian walked in with Elena beside him, the waiting families looked up with expressions mixing hope and fear. Elena recognized this moment for what it was, a test, not just of Adrian's leadership, but of whether the organization would accept her presence during crisis, whether they'd see her as legitimate partner or unwelcome distraction. Adrian moved to the first family, a woman in her 30s with 2 young children clinging to her legs. Mrs. Santos, how is Roberto? In surgery, the woman's voice shook. They said the burns were severe, but he's stable. He's going to live. I'm glad to hear that. And I promise you, medical bills, lost wages, anything your family needs while Roberto recovers, it's covered completely. Adrian's voice was gentle in a way Elena rarely heard. This shouldn't have happened. Someone who had my trust violated it, and Roberto paid the price. That's on me. You didn't light the fire, Mrs. Santos said. Marcus did. But I failed to see his betrayal sooner, failed to protect my people adequately. Adrian glanced at Elena, then back to Mrs. Santos. I'm going to fix that, make sure this never happens again, and I'm going to make sure Marcus answers for what he did. Mrs. Santos's eyes hardened. Good. Roberto's a good man, a loyal man. He deserves justice. Adrian moved to the next family, then the next, speaking to each with that same combination of authority and genuine care. Elena watched him navigate the delicate balance of showing strength while acknowledging failure, promising retribution while offering concrete support. And through it all, she stayed beside him. Not speaking unless spoken to, not demanding attention, just present as visible evidence that Adrian wasn't facing this alone. Vincent approached them after Adrian had spoken with the last family. They respect you more for coming personally, for bringing her. He nodded at Elena. Shows you're human, not just a boss. She insisted on coming, Adrian said, but there was warmth in his voice. Good. You need someone who insists on things, who won't just let you disappear into strategy and isolation. Vincent's expression turned serious. I've got word on Marcus. One of my informants spotted him meeting with Tony Castellanos' second-in-command 3 hours ago. Brooklyn. They weren't trying to hide it. So the Castellanos are backing him, Adrian said grimly. Looks that way. which means this warehouse fire was either approved or ordered by them. They're testing you, seeing how you respond to direct aggression. Adrian's jaw tightened. Then I need to respond in a way that makes them reconsider that strategy. Set up the meeting with my contact for this afternoon. And Vincent, increase security on all our key locations. If Marcus hit Queens, he might try other targets. Already done. I've got extra guys on the waterfront operations, the tech facilities, even your personal residences. Vincent paused. You should consider moving Mrs. Voss somewhere safer. If the Castellanos are escalating, I'm not going anywhere, Elena interrupted firmly. Both men looked at her in surprise. If Adrian's in danger, I'm not hiding while he faces it. We're in this together. Vincent looked at Adrian, waiting for him to overrule her, but Adrian just smiled slightly and took Elena's hand. You heard her. We're in this together. Vincent shook his head but couldn't quite hide his approval. You've got yourself a fighter, boss. Don't screw it up this time. After leaving the hospital, Adrian directed the driver to a restaurant in Little Italy, neutral territory where his meeting with the contact could happen without drawing excessive attention. Elena stayed in the car as agreed, watching through tinted windows as Adrian disappeared inside the small trattoria. The driver, a quiet man in his 50s named James, glanced at her in the rearview mirror. Mrs. Voss, there are refreshments in the console if you need anything. Thank you, James. Elena settled back, trying to calm the anxiety thrumming through her system. How long have you worked for Adrian? 8 years, since before you married him. James's voice was professionally neutral, but Elena sensed openness beneath it. What was he like then? Before the marriage? James considered the question carefully. Harder, colder. Never saw him smile, never heard him laugh. He was effective, respected, feared, but alone in a way that seemed like it would eventually break him. And after the marriage? Different. Still controlled, still strategic, but there were moments, brief glimpses of something softer, like he was fighting against it, trying to maintain the coldness, but not quite managing it. James met her eyes in the mirror. The past few months, though, he was reverting, getting harder again, more isolated. Whatever was happening between you two, it was killing something in him. Elena's throat tightened. We were both dying slowly, just in different ways. Well, you're fixing it now, I can see that. The way he looked at you in the hospital, that's not the look of a man going through motions. That's someone who's actually present. James returned his attention to the street. For what it's worth, ma'am, I'm glad you stayed. Boss needs someone who won't let him disappear into that coldness. Elena was about to respond when movement outside caught her attention. Adrian was exiting the restaurant, but his body language was tense, controlled fury evident in every line of his frame. He slid into the car beside her, his expression grim. Drive, he told James, back to the penthouse. James pulled smoothly into traffic while Elena waited for Adrian to speak, giving him space to process whatever he'd learned. The Castellanos didn't just approve Marcus's attack, Adrian said finally. They ordered it. Specifically targeted that warehouse because they knew we had people there, knew it would force my hand. Why? Elena asked. What do they gain from open conflict? Chaos. Uncertainty. They're betting that a protracted war will destabilize my organization enough that they can move into our territories while we're distracted. Adrian's hands clenched into fists. And they're using Marcus as the visible aggressor, keeping themselves at arm's length so if things go badly, they can claim he was acting independently. That's smart, Elena admitted. Cruel, but smart. It is, which is why I can't just retaliate directly. If I go after the Castellanos openly, I'm playing into their strategy. But if I don't respond strongly, I look weak to my own people and vulnerable to other rivals. Elena could see the tactical complexity tying Adrian in knots. What did your contact suggest? That I handle Marcus quietly and definitively, removing him from the board entirely. Then I approached the Castellanos not with aggression, but with a proposition. Adrian looked at her. They want territory. I give them something small, something that looks like compromise but doesn't actually weaken my position. Peace through negotiation rather than war through destruction. Will they accept that? Maybe. If I present it right, if I make it look like I'm avoiding conflict out of strategy rather than fear. Adrian ran a hand through his hair. But first I need to deal with Marcus. He's the wild card, the one who might escalate things beyond control if he's desperate enough. Where is he? My contact gave me a location. Marcus is holed up in a warehouse in Red Hook. Different one from our meeting place. The Castellanos are providing security, but it's minimal. They're keeping him at arm's length, maintaining deniability. Elena's pulse quickened. When are you moving on him? Tonight, after dark, when we have tactical advantage. Adrian turned to face her fully. And before you ask, no, you cannot come. This is the violent part, the part where people might die. I need you safe, Elena. I need to know that no matter what happens tonight, you'll be protected. Elena wanted to argue, wanted to insist on being there, but she recognized the boundary Adrian was drawing, not out of desire to exclude her, but out of genuine fear for her safety. This was the line between partnership and recklessness. Okay, she said quietly, but you promise me you'll come back, that you won't do anything stupid or reckless out of rage. I promise I'll be strategic, that I'll prioritize survival and long-term success over immediate satisfaction. Adrian took her hand. Marcus will pay for what he did, but I won't throw away everything we're building just for the pleasure of watching him suffer. They spent the afternoon at the penthouse, Adrian coordinating with his team while Elena tried to stay calm despite the anxiety eating at her. She watched him work, saw the precision with which he planned the operation, the careful balance between aggression and caution. As evening approached, Adrian changed into dark tactical clothing, checking weapons with practiced efficiency. Elena stood in the bedroom doorway, watching him prepare for violence with the same focused intensity he brought to everything. I love you, she said suddenly, the words escaping before she could think better of them. Adrian froze, a loaded pistol in his hand, staring at her with absolute shock. What? I love you. I probably have for a long time, buried under all the hurt and loneliness and distance. But I love you, and I need you to know that before you walk out that door. Elena's voice was steady, despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm her. I love you, and I'm terrified of losing you just when we're finally finding each other. Adrian set down the gun carefully and crossed to her in 3 long strides. He cupped her face in both hands, and his eyes were bright with unshed tears. I love you too, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I've loved you since the day you called me late to that meeting and didn't care who I was. I've loved you through every moment of our marriage, even when I was too afraid to show it. I love you, Elena, and I'm coming back to you tonight. That's not a hope or a wish. It's a promise. He kissed her then, deep and desperate, pouring 3 years of unspoken emotion into the connection. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard, foreheads pressed together. Be smart, Elena whispered. Be safe. Come home to me. Always, Adrian promised. She watched from the penthouse windows as his car pulled away into the Manhattan night, security vehicles flanking it protectively. The city spread out below her, millions of lights marking millions of lives being lived in the shadows of empires and conflicts they knew nothing about. Somewhere out there, Marcus was waiting. And Adrian was going to confront him, was going to step into violence and danger with only strategy and skilled people to protect him. Elena pressed her hand against the cold glass, sending every ounce of will she possessed into the universe as a prayer for his safety. She had spent 3 years loving him from a distance, watching him choose coldness over vulnerability. Tonight he was choosing differently, choosing to fight for what they were building, choosing to come back to her instead of disappearing into isolation. And Elena could only wait, hoping that love and strategy combined would be enough to bring him home safely. The hours stretched endlessly. Elena tried to distract herself with books, television, anything to stop checking her phone every 30 seconds. James had stayed behind as her security, positioned discreetly in the penthouse while she paced and worried. At midnight, her phone finally buzzed with a message. It's done. Marcus is contained. I'm coming home. Elena's knees went weak with relief. She sank onto the couch, reading the message 3 more times to make sure it was real. Adrian was safe. He was coming back. 40 minutes later, she heard the apartment door open. Elena was on her feet immediately, moving toward the entrance. Adrian walked in looking exhausted but uninjured, blood on his shirt, but apparently not his own. They collided in the hallway, Elena throwing her arms around him while Adrian held her so tightly she could barely breathe. Neither of them spoke for long minutes, just held each other in the safety of their home. "Tell me," Elena said finally, pulling back to look at his face. "Marcus is alive, but contained. He'll face consequences through proper channels, legal ones, not just violence. The Castellanos will get their negotiation, and I'll maintain my position without starting a war that destroys everything." Adrian's voice was weary but satisfied. "It's over, Elena. Really over." "Good." Elena kissed him softly. "Now come to bed. You can tell me details in the morning. Right now I just need you safe and whole beside me." They moved to the bedroom together, Adrian stripping off the blood-stained clothes while Elena prepared the shower. They stood under hot water together, washing away the night's violence, finding comfort in simple physical presence. Later, lying in bed with Elena curled against his chest, Adrian finally spoke the truth that had been building for 3 years. "I'm never letting you go again. Whatever happens, whatever challenges we face them together. No more distance, no more protective isolation. Just us, building something real." "Just us," Elena agreed, her hand resting over his heart. "Together." And for the first time in their marriage, they both believed it completely. Morning arrived with the kind of quiet clarity that only comes after storms pass. Elena woke to find Adrian already awake, propped against the headboard with his laptop balanced on his knees, working despite the early hour. But this time when he noticed her stirring, he set the computer aside immediately and pulled her close. "Couldn't sleep?" Elena asked, her voice still rough with drowsiness. "Didn't want to waste time sleeping when I could be watching you." Adrian pressed a kiss to her temple. 3 years of sleeping alone in this bed. I'm not taking a single morning with you here for granted." Elena shifted to look at him properly, seeing the exhaustion still etched around his eyes, but also something lighter, freer than she'd ever seen in him before. "Tell me what happened last night. The real version, not the sanitized summary." Adrian was quiet for a moment, weighing honesty against protection. Then he chose truth. "We found Marcus exactly where my contact said he'd be. The Castellanos had given him 2 guards. Enough to look like protection, not enough to actually save him if things went bad." Adrian's voice was measured, controlled. "I went in with Vincent and 3 others. Marcus saw us coming and tried to run. We caught him in the back alley." Elena listened without interrupting, sensing Adrian needed to speak this through completely. "He pulled a gun. Vincent disarmed him before he could fire. And then I had a choice. The choice I've been preparing for since the moment I understood what he'd done to us." Adrian met her eyes. "I could have killed him. Vincent expected it. Marcus expected it. Part of me wanted it, wanted to make him suffer the way he'd made those men in the warehouse suffer, the way he'd poisoned our marriage for years." "But you didn't," Elena said quietly. "I didn't. Because standing there with my gun to his head, all I could think about was you. About the promise I made to be strategic, to prioritize what we're building over the satisfaction of revenge." Adrian's hand found hers under the sheets. "So I made a different choice. I called Patterson and turned Marcus over to federal authorities." Elena's eyes widened. "You're cooperating with the government?" "Not exactly. Patterson arranged a deal. Marcus gives testimony about the Castellanos' operations, their money laundering, their connections to legitimate businesses. In exchange, he goes into witness protection instead of general prison population where my people or the Castellanos would eventually reach him." "That's not justice," Elena said carefully. "That's strategic convenience. It's survival. Marcus in witness protection means he's neutralized without the spectacle of a murder trial or the risk of retaliation. The Castellanos lose a valuable asset and face federal investigation. And I come out looking like someone willing to work within legal systems when it suits me, which helps with certain political relationships I need to maintain." Adrian's smile was cold. "Marcus wanted to destroy me. Instead, he's spending the rest of his life in some nowhere town under a false name, looking over his shoulder and knowing he failed completely. Some fates are worse than death." Elena processed this, understanding the chess game Adrian was playing at levels she was only beginning to comprehend. "What about the Castellanos? You said something about negotiation." "Meeting with Tony Castellano this afternoon. Neutral location. Both of us bringing minimal security as a show of good faith." Adrian's expression was carefully neutral, But Elena saw the tension underneath. I'm offering him the waterfront territory in Queens, the same area Marcus burned. It's damaged anyway, will take months to rebuild, and it's not critical to my operations. In exchange, the Castellanos back off completely. No more infiltration attempts, no more territorial disputes, just clean boundaries and mutual non-interference. Will he accept? He'd be smart to. Open war would cost both organizations millions and draw attention neither of us wants. This way he gets a win, I maintain my core operations, and we both avoid bloodshed that would bring down federal heat. Adrian paused. But there's risk. Tony Castellano is ambitious and unpredictable. He might see my offer as weakness and push for more. Then what happens? Then I make it very clear that offering compromise from a position of strength is different from capitulating from weakness. I show him exactly how much damage I could do to his organization if pushed, and let him make an informed choice about whether territory in Queens is worth the cost of full conflict. Adrian's voice went hard. I'll negotiate. I'll compromise. But I won't be bullied or manipulated. Not anymore. Not by Marcus. Not by the Castellanos. Not by anyone. Elena heard the shift in him, the way he'd integrated the lessons of the past week into something harder and clearer than the defensive coldness he'd operated from before. This wasn't isolation masquerading as protection. This was genuine strength that didn't require distance to maintain itself. I want to come to the meeting, Elena said. Adrian started to shake his head, but she pressed on before he could refuse outright. Not inside the room. I understand that would compromise the dynamic, but nearby, like yesterday. Because if this goes wrong, if Tony Castellano is more ambitious than smart, I need to be close enough to know immediately. Elena held his gaze. You don't get to protect me from reality anymore. We're partners. That means I'm choosing to be present for the dangerous parts too. Adrian studied her face, and Elena saw the internal war playing out behind his eyes. Finally, he nodded slowly. You stay with James and armed security. Any sign of trouble, you leave immediately. Don't wait for me. Don't try to help. Just get to safety. That's non-negotiable. Agreed. Elena sealed the promise with a kiss. They spent the morning in careful preparation, Adrian coordinating with his team while Elena insisted on making them breakfast. A small gesture of domesticity that felt revolutionary after 3 years of existing in parallel rather than together. She watched him take calls while eating the omelet she'd prepared, saw him smile at her between tense conversations about security protocols and strategic positioning. This was what she'd wanted all along. Not isolation from his world, but integration into it. Not protection through ignorance, but partnership through truth. Patterson arrived at 11 with documents for Adrian to review before the meeting, analyses of the Queen's territory, financial projections, legal frameworks for the proposed deal. Elena sat beside Adrian as he worked through the papers, asking questions when she didn't understand something, offering observations when she saw angles he might have missed. You're good at this, Patterson said at one point, watching Elena identify a potential loophole in the territorial agreement. Have you considered making this official? Legal counsel, strategic advisor, something that gives you actual authority within the organization? Elena looked at Adrian, gauging his reaction. His expression was thoughtful rather than dismissive. We could do that, Adrian said slowly. Create a legitimate role that recognizes your involvement without making you a target. Chief Operations Officer for the legitimate businesses, maybe. Gives you access and authority while maintaining plausible distance from anything questionable. I don't need a title to be your partner, Elena said. No, but you might need one to be respected by everyone else in the organization. Some of these men, they're traditional, slow to accept change. A formal position makes it clear that you're not just the boss's wife, you're a decision maker in your own right. Adrian took her hand. If you want it, no pressure either way. Elena considered the offer seriously. A year ago, even a month ago, she would have refused out of principle or fear or the simple desire to maintain some separation from Adrian's world. But now, having seen that world up close, having proven she could handle its complexities, the idea held appeal. Chief Operations Officer, she said. With real authority, real responsibilities, not a decorative title. Real authority, Adrian confirmed. Patterson can draw up the paperwork, make it official by the end of the week. They arrived at the meeting location, an upscale restaurant in Tribeca that had been closed for a private event, an hour early. Adrian's security team swept the building thoroughly, while Elena waited in the car with James, watching through tinted windows as Vincent positioned people at strategic points. The Castellanos arrived exactly on time, Tony Castellano emerging from a black SUV with 2 bodyguards flanking him. He was younger than Elena expected, maybe early 40s, with the kind of polished appearance that spoke of old money and careful cultivation. Nothing about him screamed criminal. He could have been any successful businessman heading into a lunch meeting. But Elena saw the way Adrian's posture shifted when Tony entered the restaurant, saw the predatory calculation in both men's eyes as they sized each other up through the windows. This wasn't just business. This was 2 apex predators negotiating territory, each one looking for weakness in the other. "This is the dangerous part," James said quietly from the driver's seat. "Not the violence. That's straightforward. This kind of negotiation, where everything depends on reading intention and maintaining face. One wrong word, one perceived insult, and it all falls apart." Elena watched Adrian disappear into the restaurant, every line of his body radiating controlled confidence. She wanted to be in there with him, wanted to see how he navigated this high-stakes conversation. But she understood why her presence would complicate things. Tony Castellano was traditional, old school, the kind of man who saw wives as possessions rather than partners. Having Elena visible during negotiations would read as either weakness or provocation, neither of which served Adrian's strategy. So she waited, checking her phone obsessively despite knowing Adrian wouldn't contact her until the meeting concluded. Minutes stretched into an hour, then 90 minutes. Elena's anxiety built with each passing moment, imagining scenarios where everything went wrong, where Tony rejected the offer and chose war instead of peace. When Adrian finally emerged, his expression was carefully neutral. Elena couldn't read whether the meeting had succeeded or failed until he slid into the car beside her and his mask dropped for just a moment, showing exhaustion mixed with satisfaction. "It's done," he said simply. Tony accepted the deal. Queen's territory for guaranteed non-interference. Clean boundaries, formal agreement, witnessed and documented. Relief flooded through Elena so intensely she felt lightheaded. Just like that? Not quite. He pushed for additional concessions, wanted access to some of my shipping routes, demanded assurances about my political connections. I gave him some minor access that doesn't actually compromise my operations, and made vague promises about introducing him to certain people. Adrian smiled slightly. He thinks he won more than he actually did. But the key thing is, the Castellanos are backing off. The immediate threat is over. Elena threw her arms around him, not caring that James could see them in the rearview mirror, not caring about anything except the fact that Adrian had walked into danger and emerged safely on the other side. "Take us home," Adrian told James, his arms tightening around Elena. The drive back to the penthouse felt different than any other journey they'd made together. Elena sat pressed against Adrian's side, his arm around her shoulders, both of them finally allowing themselves to believe that the crisis had actually passed. Marcus was neutralized, the Castellanos were satisfied, and the immediate existential threats to Adrian's empire had been resolved. But Elena knew from experience that resolution of external threats didn't automatically heal internal damage. They'd survived the crisis, yes, but they still had to figure out how to actually build a marriage from the wreckage of the past 3 years. As if reading her thoughts, Adrian spoke quietly. "The divorce papers. They're still filed, still legally in process." "I know," Elena said. "We could let them go through, start completely fresh, get married again with actual vows we both mean, actual promises we both intend to keep." Elena considered this. "Or we could withdraw them, keep the marriage we have but transform it into something real." "What do you want?" Adrian asked. "I want honesty about what we're doing. No more pretending, no more performing for outside expectations." Elena shifted to look at him directly. "If we withdraw the papers, if we decide to stay married, I need to know you're choosing me because you want me, not because divorce looks weak or complicated." "I'm choosing you because I love you," Adrian said simply. "Because the past week has shown me what life could be if I stop hiding behind strategy and control. Because you make me want to be better than the cold, isolated version of myself I'd turned into." He paused. "But I also need to know you're choosing me for the right reasons. Not because of the crisis, not because of the drama and intensity, but because you actually want to build a life with who I really am, including the darkness, the violence, the moral compromises. I want all of it, Elena said firmly. I want the brilliant strategist and the damaged man. I want the empire builder and the person who's terrified of caring too much. I want late-night strategy sessions and quiet Sunday mornings. I want arguments and reconciliations and the messy work of actually being partners instead of polite strangers. Adrian kissed her then, deep and thorough, a promise sealed with physical connection. When they pulled apart, both breathing hard, he smiled against her lips. Okay then, we withdraw the papers. We keep this marriage and make it something real. The next few weeks unfolded with the surreal quality of dreams becoming tangible reality. Elena watched Adrian systematically restructure his life to make space for actual partnership, delegating responsibilities he'd previously hoarded, creating boundaries between work and home, actively choosing vulnerability over control. It wasn't seamless. They fought, sometimes intensely, when Adrian defaulted to making unilateral decisions, or when Elena pushed for transparency in areas Adrian found difficult to share. But they fought honestly, without the distance and defensiveness that had characterized their previous relationship. And they always came back to each other, always chose resolution over retreat. Patterson made Elena's position official, chief operations officer with genuine authority over the legitimate business operations. Adrian's inner circle accepted her presence with varying degrees of enthusiasm, but even the skeptics couldn't deny that she brought value. Elena had a gift for seeing patterns others missed, for identifying inefficiencies and opportunities that had been invisible to people too close to the operations. "You're making us more money than Marcus ever did," Vincent admitted one evening during a strategy meeting. "And you're doing it without skimming off the top or plotting betrayal. Novel concept." Elena smiled at the grudging praise. "I'm motivated by different incentives than Marcus was. He wanted to take over. I want to build something sustainable." The men at the table exchanged glances, and Elena saw the shift in their perception of her. She wasn't just the boss's wife anymore. She was a legitimate part of the leadership structure, someone whose opinion carried weight. 3 months after the crisis with Marcus, Elena woke to find Adrian already dressed for the day, standing at the bedroom windows with his phone pressed to his ear. His posture was tense, and Elena's heart rate immediately accelerated. After months of relative peace, she'd started to believe they were truly past the immediate dangers. But Adrian's expression when he ended the call and turned to face her wasn't fear or crisis. It was something more complicated, grief mixed with grim satisfaction. "Marcus is dead," Adrian said quietly. "Heart attack and witness protection. Or at least, that's the official story." Elena sat up slowly, processing this information. "You think it wasn't natural?" "I think the Castellanos have resources, even in witness protection. I think they decided Marcus was a loose end that needed tying up." Adrian moved to sit on the edge of the bed. Patterson confirmed it through his channels. "Marcus died yesterday afternoon. No signs of foul play that would trigger investigation, but the timing is convenient for everyone who wanted him silenced." "How do you feel about it?" Elena asked carefully. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Relieved, mostly. Marcus alive was always a potential threat, even contained. There was always a chance he'd find a way to cause trouble, to reach out to remaining loyalists or make deals that complicated things. He looked at her. "I know I should probably feel something else. Guilt, maybe, or horror at how easily a life can be erased. But mostly I just feel relief that one more threat is permanently resolved." Elena understood what he was revealing, the fundamental difference between how he processed violence versus how normal people did. For Adrian, Marcus's death was a strategic calculation, a problem solved rather than a human tragedy. It was the same cold pragmatism that had helped him survive in a world where hesitation meant death. "That doesn't make you a monster," Elena said, taking his hand. "It makes you someone who's had to adapt to survive in a world most people never see. I'm not going to judge you for feeling relief that a man who tried to destroy us is gone." Adrian pulled her close, and Elena felt some of the tension leave his body. "Sometimes I worry that you're going to wake up one day and realize you married someone fundamentally broken. Someone who can't process emotions the way normal people do, who sees everything through the lens of strategy and survival. You're not broken. You're adapted. There's a difference." Elena pressed a kiss to his jaw. "And I didn't marry you looking for normal. I married you looking for extraordinary, even when I didn't fully understand what that meant." They spent the morning in quiet companionship, Adrian handling the administrative details of Marcus's death, while Elena worked through financial projections for an expansion into legitimate tech investments. It was the kind of ordinary partnership Elena had craved during their years of distance, working side by side, sharing space and time without constant crisis or drama. Around noon, Patterson arrived with news that shifted their focus entirely. The federal investigation into the Castellanos is moving forward, Patterson said, settling into one of the penthouse's leather chairs. Marcus's testimony before he died was enough to trigger warrants, asset seizures, the whole apparatus. Tony Castellano is looking at serious charges. Adrian leaned forward, interest sharpening. How serious? RICO charges, money laundering, conspiracy. If they make everything stick, Tony's looking at 20 years minimum. Patterson pulled out documents, which creates an interesting situation for you. The Castellanos' territory will be vulnerable during the legal chaos. Other organizations will move to fill the vacuum. And you think I should be one of them, Adrian said slowly. I think you have an opportunity to expand your legitimate operations into areas the Castellanos previously controlled. Real estate development, shipping infrastructure, political connections, all things that are legal and profitable if done correctly. Patterson glanced at Elena. Mrs. Voss's operational expertise would be particularly valuable in managing that kind of expansion without overextending. Elena met Adrian's eyes, seeing the calculation happening behind them. This was the choice that would define the next phase of their lives, whether to capitalize on the Castellanos' collapse by expanding the empire, or whether to consolidate what they had and focus on sustainability over growth. What do you think? Adrian asked her directly. I think we should be strategic about it. Identify the most valuable opportunities, the ones that align with our legitimate business goals, and pursue those selectively. Elena pulled up the financial models she'd been working on. We've got the capital and infrastructure to absorb some expansion, but we need to be careful not to grow so fast that we lose control of quality and operations. Adrian studied her projections, then looked at Patterson. Give us a week to analyze the opportunities. Then we'll make decisions about which territories to pursue. After Patterson left, Elena and Adrian spent the afternoon in deep strategic planning, the kind of partnership they'd never achieved during their first 3 years of marriage. Elena pushed Adrian to consider long-term sustainability over short-term gains. Adrian helped Elena understand the political and social complexities that would affect implementation of her operational strategies. By evening, they'd outlined a plan that satisfied both of them. Selective expansion into the Castellanos' former territories focused on legitimate business operations that would strengthen their position without creating the kind of overextension that invited challenges from other rivals. We work well together, Adrian observed, sitting back and studying the notes they'd generated. I can't believe I spent 3 years keeping you separate from this part of my life. What a waste. We're fixing it now, Elena said. That's what matters. That night, lying in bed with Elena's head resting on his chest, Adrian spoke into the darkness. I've been thinking about the future. Not just business strategy, but actual future. What we want our lives to look like 5 years from now, 10 years from now. Elena shifted to look at him, curious. And what do you see? I see us still doing this, working together, building something that matters, making decisions as partners. I see the organization evolving, becoming more legitimate and less dependent on gray market operations. I see, he paused, vulnerability flickering across his features. I see the possibility of something beyond just us. Maybe a family, if that's something you'd want. People to build this legacy for instead of just building it to build it. Elena's breath caught. They'd never discussed children during their marriage, had both tacitly avoided the subject as something that required a real relationship to even consider. I'd want that, she said quietly. Not now, maybe. We're still figuring out how to be partners, how to build a marriage that actually works. But someday, yes, I'd want to raise children with you. Teach them to be strong and strategic, but also vulnerable and honest. Show them a different model than the one you grew up with. Adrian's arms tightened around her. My father loved my mother desperately, and that love destroyed them both, him through violence, her through grief. I've spent my whole life trying to avoid their fate by avoiding that kind of intensity of feeling. But maybe the lesson wasn't to avoid love. Maybe it was to build something strong enough to survive the dangers that come with it. We're building that, Elena said. Every day, every choice to be honest instead of distant, every moment we choose partnership over protection, we're building something strong enough to survive. They made love that night with a tenderness that felt different from the desperate passion of their reconciliation. This was quieter, more certain, the physical expression of promises they were finally ready to keep. 6 months after Marcus's death, Adrian made an announcement that shocked everyone in his organization. He was stepping back from day-to-day operations of the questionable businesses, transitioning full control to Vincent and the other lieutenants while he focused exclusively on the legitimate empire he and Elena were building together. "You're retiring?" Vincent asked, disbelief clear in his voice during the meeting where Adrian revealed his plans. "I'm evolving," Adrian corrected. "The organization is strong enough now that it doesn't need me micromanaging every operation. And I've got other priorities. Building businesses that my children won't someday have to explain or apologize for." The men exchanged glances, processing this revelation about children, about legacy, about the fundamental shift in Adrian's priorities. "This is her influence," Dominic said, but there was no accusation in his voice. "You've never talked about children before. Never talked about legacy beyond the organization itself." "Elena's influence, yes," Adrian acknowledged without shame. "She's shown me there's more to life than just maintaining power and avoiding vulnerability. That you can be strong without being isolated, strategic without being cold." "And if someone sees this as weakness?" Vincent asked carefully. "If rivals decide a retired boss is a vulnerable boss? Then they'll learn the difference between stepping back and being weak." Adrian's smile was cold enough to remind everyone exactly who they were dealing with. "I'm not disappearing or becoming soft. I'm choosing where to invest my time and energy, and anyone who mistakes that choice for vulnerability will regret it." The meeting concluded with wary acceptance, the lieutenants recognizing that Adrian's decision was final, but still processing the implications. After everyone left, Elena approached Adrian with a mixture of surprise and concern. "You didn't tell me you were planning to announce that today," she said. "I know. I should have discussed it with you first. That was old habits talking, making unilateral decisions." Adrian pulled her close. "But I've been thinking about it for weeks. Every day I spend managing operations I don't care about anymore is a day I'm not spending building something meaningful with you. Life's too short to waste on obligations that don't serve our actual goals." "What if they're right?" Elena asked quietly. "What if rivals see this as an opening?" "Let them try. I'll still have all the connections, all the leverage, all the strategic knowledge I've always had. I'm just choosing to exercise it more selectively." Adrian kissed her forehead. "Trust me. This is the right move for us." Elena did trust him, she realized, completely, in a way she'd never managed during their first 3 years of marriage. Not blind trust that ignored potential problems, but informed trust that recognized Adrian's strategic brilliance while also holding him accountable for his choices. They spent the next year building their legitimate empire with the same intensity Adrian had once brought to his questionable operations. Elena's operational expertise combined with Adrian's strategic vision created something powerful, a network of businesses that were profitable, sustainable, and entirely legal. Tech investments, real estate development, shipping infrastructure, all woven together into an empire that could withstand scrutiny. The divorce papers, officially withdrawn 6 months after being filed, sat in a file in Patterson's office as a reminder of how close they'd come to destroying something precious through fear and protective distance. On their 4th anniversary, counting from their original wedding date, Adrian surprised Elena with a small ceremony in the penthouse. No guests, no spectacle, just Patterson officiating while Adrian and Elena exchanged new vows. "I promise to choose honesty over protection," Adrian said, his voice steady as he held both of Elena's hands. "To share my burdens instead of carrying them alone. To trust you with the truth of who I am, even when that truth is ugly or complicated. To build our life together as partners, not as protector and protected." Elena's eyes glistened with tears as she spoke her own vows. "I promise to choose a presence over safety. To stand beside you in crisis instead of accepting distance as protection. To call you on your defaults to control and isolation. To love all of you. The brilliant strategist and the damaged survivor, the empire builder and the man learning how to be vulnerable. Patterson smiled as he pronounced them married. Again, really, but in a way that mattered more than the original ceremony had. This time, both of them understood exactly what they were promising, exactly what they were choosing. That night, lying in bed with the city lights painting patterns across the ceiling, Elena thought about the journey that had brought them here. From divorce papers on a desk to genuine partnership, from protective distance to chosen vulnerability, from two people destroying themselves slowly to two people building something real together. "What are you thinking?" Adrian asked, his hand tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "That I'm grateful Marcus betrayed you," Elena said. Adrian propped himself up on one elbow, surprise flickering across his features. "That's an unexpected take. If he hadn't, we might have continued that slow death for years. You'd have stayed distant, I'd have stayed lonely, and we'd have destroyed each other through gradual erosion instead of dramatic crisis." Elena turned to look at him. "Marcus forced us to confront the truth, that the way we were living wasn't actually protecting anyone. It was just killing us both slowly." "So you're saying I should thank him?" Adrian's tone was wry. "I'm saying that sometimes the worst betrayals lead to the most important revelations." Elena traced the line of his jaw. "He tried to destroy us. Instead, he gave us the crisis we needed to actually see each other clearly." Adrian was quiet for a moment, processing this perspective. Then he smiled, that genuine smile Elena had seen so rarely during their first years together. "You're right. In a twisted way, Marcus gave us a gift. Not intentionally, and not one I'd have chosen, but a gift nonetheless." He pulled her closer. "Though I'm still glad he's dead." Elena laughed despite the darkness of the statement. "That's fair." They fell asleep wrapped around each other, two people who'd learned to choose love over fear, vulnerability over control, partnership over protection. The empire continued around them, evolving into something more sustainable and less dependent on the shadows Adrian had once operated from. And when Elena's phone buzzed months later with a text from an unknown number, her heart rate no longer spiked with immediate fear. Because whatever came next, whoever thought they could threaten or manipulate or destroy what she and Adrian had built, they would face it together. The text itself was innocuous, probably a wrong number or spam, but Elena showed it to Adrian anyway, maintaining the transparency they'd worked so hard to establish. Adrian glanced at it, confirmed it was nothing important, and set both their phones aside. "No more secrets," he said simply. "No more distance," Elena agreed. Outside the windows, Manhattan continued its endless dance of power and survival, empires rising and falling while millions of people lived their lives in the spaces between. Inside the penthouse, two people who'd almost destroyed themselves through fear finally understood that love required more courage than any empire ever had. They'd survived betrayal and crisis, violence and negotiation, the slow death of distance and the terrifying vulnerability of actual intimacy. And they'd chosen each other, fully, honestly, without protection or pretense. That choice, renewed every day in small moments and large decisions, was worth more than any empire Adrian had ever built. It was everything.